Ramchand Kak and Meherchand Mahajan gap. So he knows Kashmir so well and Indo-Pak relations so well. General Sharma is an expert on China. He is an geostrategic expert and operational expert on international relations and on so many such institutions he's wedded to, and he is always active, not only when he became the director, but from the days of his retirement. He is one of the most accomplished active participants in all the track to business which is going on officially and unofficially also. And we have Professor Javed Kakroo. He is a native Kashmiri from Baramulla, basically. Belongs to an illustrious family of Kakroos. They were part of freedom struggle. And his uncles, his family is very much involved in the day-to-day political affairs of Kashmir. He himself is a professor.
Meeting chalu hui.
He is in Birmingham and he is an activist. He runs a Waller cultural channel there now, recently started, and it has a viewership. It has crossed about 50,000 viewership all across and in the valley also. And we have Manzoor Ahmed Shah is a lawyer. He is a solicitor in Supreme Court of UK. And Manzoor Ahmed Shah, in his early days of life, as a good dreamer, crossed over to Pakistan and stayed there for 10 years, got married, and now he has shifted to London. He has done law in Pakistan, and thereafter he did the course in London in order to get to the bar of London. So he is one of the accomplished lawyers these days, having a lot of practice around, but a Kashmiri native, having Kashmir and interest of Kashmir is dear to his heart. And we have Dr. Manmeet Bali Nag. She is also a daughter of the soil. She is basically from Kashmir and from Baramulla, and she belongs to Sikh community. I should not have said that. She is an accomplished professor, and she works as an associate professor in a prestigious university in Delhi. And she is one of the foremost activists and also active participants in all the strategic affairs regarding Indo-Pak and Jammu and Kashmir particularly. And we have...
Sir, I am from Pulwama.
You are from Pulwama. Oh, then you are...
I am from Pulwama as well.
He's also, Manzoor is also from Pulwama.
Okay, good to know, sir.
He is also from Pulwama. Then we have our Dr. Q.A.Aashob. He is basically a very accomplished doctor, oncologist, and he is chairman of a hospital in Kashmir, but a very active socio-political activist. He is president of a civil society group in Kashmir, and he takes part actively towards the resolution of Kashmir imbroglio peacefully, and he is a peace activist besides being a doctor, and he carries a lot of influence in the civil society of Kashmir. So we are 6 panelists here, and I think Sunil should start the program. It's already 5 o'clock. So Sunil, go ahead.
Sorry, I was on mute. Just give me a minute, sir. There are some more people who are waiting. I'm admitting them.
Okay.
Okay. I think we are dot at 5:02, just 2 minutes into the hour. And well, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you to this webinar on Pakistan's army game plan in J&K and India's response. Very interesting subject, very interesting topic. The webinar is being conducted on behalf of Kashmir Policy and Strategy Group. This group is a very well-known citizen initiative for justice and conflict resolution. It has eminent experts from public life. We have former governors, civil servants, intelligence experts, diplomats, defense experts, lawyers, geostrategic experts, politicians, and eminent legal minds as its members. Over the years, this group is internationally and domestically recognized as a credible think tank. The chairman of the group, Shri Ashok Bhan, is one of the country's top senior advocates and an accomplished practical diplomat. He has represented the country at UN General Assembly and UNHRC. The convener of the group is a past official interlocutor for Kashmir affairs and
Problem in audio.
also former President Shri Pranab Mukherjee was one of our patrons. On the 73rd anniversary of this Black Day, we have a very experienced panel of speakers, all mostly natives of Jammu and Kashmir, who shall enlighten us with their views on Pakistan's army agenda on Kashmir and India's response. Before I proceed, I would want to just mention a few ground rules that all of us will follow during this webinar. The speakers will have 10 minutes to express their opinions. We would discourage interventions, but interventions can be allowed only with the permission of the chair. Audience, if they have any questions, they should please put those in the chat box. We will have a detailed question and answer session at the end of the session. Towards the end, we'll have a question session. I would also request people who are not speaking to be on mute. Because there's a lot of background noise and that disturbs speakers. So let's all remain on mute unless we are speaking. I am also, with everybody's permission here, I am recording this webinar and I should be putting this recording separately later on. Our chairman will let you know where the recording is placed. So with this, I would now hand over to the chairman, KPSG, Ashok Bhan, for opening remarks and initiating the session. So Bhan sir, over to you, please.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Sunil. I welcome all the participants and the accomplished panel speakers. I wish to start by saying that on 22nd of October for 1947, Pakistan invaded Kashmir and brought in its wake horrifying stories of mass plunder and vandalism. Thousands of men, women, and children were mercilessly killed. And thereafter, on 26th of October, Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession and acceding his state with India. Following the accession, the state of India and troops were airlifted to Srinagar and repelled the tribal invasion. But October 47, in fact, was a beginning of first Indo-Pak war. It was camouflaged as a tribal invasion, but it was supported by the regular army establishment of Pakistan. The consequences of this watershed event are still affecting the country. It's necessary to create such historical narratives in order to create people. The aim of such initiative would be to bring awareness among people about this phase of our history, which is a dark chapter of our history. It will also help in remembering how the country fought in its very first conflict faced by India. And that conflict is still being faced by the country. Go to the wars which have been fought. But for last 30 years, we are in for a proxy war with Pakistan. And Pakistan has brought and inflicted death and destruction in Kashmir. And after 3 decades of conflict in Kashmir and death and destruction phenomenon brought about by Pakistan through its militant wings, mercenaries and local militants in Kashmir, it has resulted in disastrous consequences of almost destroying the whole infrastructure, of education, of health, of culture, and it has changed even the demography by exiling a full religious minority of Kashmir. And also, it further carries on the agenda which once Kashmiris have rejected. And this invasion of 22nd October 47 was also part of an insult which Q.A.Aashob Muhammad felt on account of his theory of two nations being rejected by people on the ground of, on the soil of Kashmir. When Q.A.Aashob Jinnah came to Kashmir to plead with Kashmiris that you being the Islamic majority
Hello?
of this country.
Oh my. Hello?
Pakistan
Hello?
natural habit.
Hello, Akbar. Hello?
Pakistan natural habitat. And Kashmiris rejected them after 30 years of conflict. After 30 years of conflict now,
Shut the fuck up, you little bitch.
rejecting the Pakistan's theory, Pakistan's annexation agenda, and Pakistan politically in Kashmir. So,
Yo,
friends,
go back to terrorism, bro.
discuss India's and also narrative coming up as a fresh narrative of New Age youth. New Age youth is reconciled now. And see their right in India by remaining part of India.
Yeah, I'm the one who actually did it, so yeah, I've already I know what you mean. So if you, I would like to tell you,
Sunil, what is this?
don't give it to me, I will record you.
Sir, somebody has
Sunil,
I will take all the money, not send me the money.
Sunil, what is this happening?
When I
All, I'm muting all, and just a second, let me unmute only Bhan Saab. I'm just muting all. Just give me a minute. I'm muting everybody. I will unmute only Bhan Saab. Bhan Saab, you are unmuted. You can talk now.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have segregated this discussion into two parts. The first part would be what is the India's response to this phenomenon of continuing war and Pak army's design to unsettle idea of India in Kashmir. And the second part would be that what is the local narrative, what is the new age narrative, which has come up after the Article 370 was made inoperable last year in August, on August 5th. There is a paradigm shift in Kashmir's ground situation, and therefore a local narrative is also gradually changing. You must have seen on your screens that for the first time in the country's history, there is a recognition of this 22nd Black Day by putting up hoardings, and these are done by Kashmiri youth themselves. These hoardings are put up. There was a news item also, a very big news item in Times Now and other also, that youth, new age youth is enthusiastic about saying, Pakistan, enough is enough now. You are the aggressors. Please stop and vacate from Kashmir. Let us decide our destiny for ourselves. And we hope that our future better lies with India than with Pakistan. This is the new narrative which is coming up. And on this narrative, I think Manzoor Ahmed Shah and also Professor Javed, Kakroo Saab, and also Dr. Ashok will lay more emphasis that what is the new narrative coming up. But on the strategic affairs of Indian response and Indian state's response, I would like to request Lieutenant General Katoch Saab to give his thoughts about the subject. Lieutenant General Katoch Saab, please. Sunil, unmute, Mr.
Yes, I have unmuted him.
So he is not
Katoch
audible.
Saab, you will need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Bhan, for having given me an opportunity to speak on this webinar. And before I start, I must also thank two of my very esteemed seniors whom I have served in Kashmir for also being here. And they are both, like me, from the Jammu and Kashmir Rifles.
Oh, that's great.
The subject given to me to cover in this, the time given is decoding the Pakistan Army game plan since 1947. And of course, the time now is 14 minutes past about 5 o'clock. And at the same time, on the 22nd of October 1947, my father was standing with a lathi somewhere at the gate of Badami Bagh Kent. He was a cadet in the J&K State Forces Officers Training School. And Brigadier Rajendra Singh at this time was collecting every last man that he could find, able-bodied man from the J&K Army, gathering them into a group of about 150, which included the instructors and the senior cadets of the J&K State Forces Officers Training School. And by the time today's webinar ends, that is by 6:30, in requisition buses, they had started off from Uri. Of course, the rest is of course part of history. Now, this was in response to the tribal invasion and the Pakistani invasion launched under Major General Akbar Khan of the Pakistan Army on 22nd October. And this was the date when 10 tribal Lashkars crossed Kashmir's border at Muzaffarabad. While crossing the border today in the morning, by this time, they had killed another one of my relatives. He was commanding 4 Kashmir infantry, now presently 4 Jammu and Kashmir Rifles at Domail. And his battalion was 50% Dogra Muslims, 50% Dogra Hindus, and had come back just 2 years back from the Burma front after a very successful tenure there. They had won 4 military crosses equivalent to Mahavir Chakras. Every one of the company commanders had got it, and he had full faith in his battalion. And even when the Maharaja told him that you be a little careful that people are trying to subvert our men, he said, no, sir, I have full faith in my men. But unfortunately, some of his men did get subverted. Because how they got subverted was that the war had actually not really started on 22nd October 47 was the invasion on the northern sector towards Kashmir. But in the southern sector towards Punch, it had started much earlier. Nearly a month prior to the invasion, Pakistan had put in an economic blockade in spite of the fact that it had signed the standstill agreement in which Mr. Bhan mentioned it was signed when my grandfather was the interim prime minister. And that was to drive home the point that Pakistan held the key for the survival of Kashmir. And to set the stage, Pakistan had commenced armed attacks in the opening days of October, targeting Hindus and in the Muslim majority towns of Mirpur, Bhimbar, Naushera, Rajouri, Kotli, and Punch. These scattered attacks across the frontage of Western Kashmir aimed to dissipate the state forces and denude their capability for concentrated application. The urgent need felt by Pakistan to force the issue of Kashmir and secure its speedy accession to Pakistan contained the possibility of a solution of more than one problem in Pakistan's eyes. And this was one to keep the restive tribals, at peace with the alluring promise of land and plenty in Kashmir. And we know it, that during the British time, these tribals had to be kept at peace with armed force. So Pakistan did have that problem, and it felt that it could solve this problem by giving them, some place to vent off their ferocity. This would secure Kashmir, and it would kill the Pakhtunistan movement and secure Pakistan's safety and prosperity. The invasion of the Kashmir Valley from Pakistan showed considerable strategic and tactical insight because it was planned by the military, by the Pakistani military. The plan was first to split up the state's army into tiny groups by means of hit and run attacks, and which they started off in the southern sector, and because of which the only reserve battalion that the J&K State Army had at Srinagar, that is 8 Kashmir infantry, was sucked into the Poonch sector. And therefore, by 22nd, when the war started off in the Kashmir Valley side, there were no reserves left. And that is why Brigadier Rajendra Singh had to, go in the manner that I first mentioned. Vicious communal propaganda at the same time was turned in at full blast at the state, and the Muslims in the frontier areas in the state and the state army were incited to rebel. The Kashmiris had planned 2 sectors. One was the northern sector, which was north of Rawalpindi. It was under a person called Khurshid Anwar. He was the commander of the Muslim League National Guards. I'll talk a little more about this later. The southern sector was south of Rawalpindi, under the command of Zaman Kiani. Both were nominally under a person called Sardar Shaukat Hayat Khan. And then, of course, General Akbar Khan, I mentioned, was, overall controlling from the army side. But when I tell you about these 3 people that I mentioned, it is not that they were really pure civilians. In the northern sector, Khurshid Anwar was a wartime commissioned officer from the Army Service Corps, and he had become the commander of the Muslim League National Guards. And the Muslim League National Guards were organized as a full-fledged militia. If you go onto the internet and see photographs in Getty Images, you will find photographs of the Muslim League National Guards, and they just look like the army. So they were not really some ragtag bunch. South of Rawalpindi, I told you, Zaman Kiani was there. Zaman Kiani was Major Zaman Kiani. He was an outstanding soldier. He was a sword of honor from the 1935 batch from the Indian Military Academy, from the Punjab Regiment. He was Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's right-hand man. And there in the Indian National Army, he was Major General Zaman Kiani. Of course, after the war, Second World War was over, and INA soldiers who had joined the INA, they were moved out of the army. So obviously, he was no longer in the army. So he had become a civilian, but he was a very accomplished ex-military man. And both were under Sardar Shaukat Hayat Khan. Sardar Shaukat Hayat Khan was a scion of a very prominent family from Punjab. He was commissioned into the Armored Corps, into the 16th Lancers, which was part of the Indian Army at present. And during the Second World War, he volunteered and joined Skinner's Horse and fought the Second World War in Africa. So he was a very accomplished army officer. But after coming back, because of his family traditions, he left the army and he joined politics. And for this particular plan, as far as the Pakistani Prime Minister was concerned, he had put Shaukat Hayat Khan in charge, northern sector, Khurshid Anwar, southern sector, Zaman Kiani, to give it the look of a civilian uprising, which it was not. On 20th August, at one of the brigades on the frontier, the Bannu Brigade, the brigade major was Major O.S. Kalkar, and he had been authorized to open the brigade commander's mail because the brigade commander, who was a Britisher, Brigadier J.C. Murray, was out of station. The mail in question was from the general headquarters and contained the plan for Op Gulmarg, which was the plan for attack on Kashmir. According to the Gulmarg plan, every Pathan tribe was required to enlist at least 1 Lashkar of 1,000 tribesmen. After enlistment, these Lashkars were to be concentrated at Bannu, Wana, Peshawar, Kohat, Thal, and Nashera by the first week of September 1947. The brigade commanders at these places were to issue them arms, ammunition, and some essential items of clothing on paper showing these issued against some Pakistan army units. Each tribal Lashkar was also to be provided with a major, a captain, and 10 JCs of the regular Pakistan army. The major was to be the actual commander of the Lashkar and act as advisor of the tribal chief, who was called the Malik, who was nominally in command of the tribals. And the captain was to act as the staff officer. Each of the 10 JCOs was to be in charge of a group of 100 men. These Pakistan regulars were to be dressed, they were supposed to be Pathans by ethnicity and to dress and live exactly like the other Pathans in the Lashkar. The entire force was to be commanded by Major Akbar Khan, who gave himself the code name of Tariq. And he was assisted by Brigadier Sher Khan, the Director of Military Intelligence. And their headquarters was, they were given a headquarters inside the Pakistan Army headquarters, next to where the Pakistan CNC used to sit, which at that time was a British, Sir Frank Missouri. And of course, he was replaced later because he was not in favor of this thing happening, but he was replaced. All Lashkars were concentrated at Abbottabad by 18 October and thereafter moved forward. The broad outline of plan in the Kashmir Valley side was for 6 Lashkars to advance along the main road from Muzaffarabad to Srinagar via Dhumel, Uri and Baramulla, with the task of capturing the Srinagar airfield and subsequently advancing to the Banihal Pass. 2 Lashkars were to advance from the Haji Pir Pass direct onto Gulmarg on the right flank, and similarly 2 Lashkars were to advance from Tithwal through the Nastachun Pass for capturing Sopur, Handwara and Bandipur. And like I mentioned, other 10 Lashkars were already in operation in the Punch, Bimbar, Rawalkot area. In the overall plan, arrangements were made for the detailing of guides and informers from the so-called Azad Army to all these tribal Lashkars on a very liberal scale. General Akbar Khan was also given the task of organizing the Azad Army, which was composed of demobilized soldiers who were in plenty in the southern sectors, demobilized from the British Indian Army. After the Second World War, almost about 400,000 soldiers had been demobilized. So these retired soldiers were not old soldiers. They were young soldiers and very, very looking forward to do something because they were all without a job. And elements of the Jammu and Kashmir state forces who the Pakistanis had planned to subvert, and some of them did get subverted. Dumps of arms, ammunition and clothing were established. Forward, out of the 3 Pakistani infantry divisions in West Pakistan, 7 infantry division of the Pak Army was to concentrate in the area Mari, Abbottabad by last night, 21 October, and to be ready to move into Jammu and Kashmir territory as soon as the opposition had been, or the state forces had been overcome, and to consolidate the hold on the valley. 1 infantry brigade was also held in readiness at Sialkot to move on to Jammu. So, in essence, the Pakistani army's game plan was to provide the backbone, the support, and the firm base. The local irregulars were to provide guides, language interface, and labor. And the tribals were to distract the Indian military response, causing slow attrition, which is the mantra that the Pakistani army has always fallen upon and is still following. Major General Akbar Khan, in his book, Raiders in Kashmir, has said as much that this is the only way to be able to meet the superior Indian military challenge. The difference now is that instead of the only tribals, you have radicalized Pakistani citizens organized under fundamentalist religious organizations who draw their inspiration from perceived atrocities on Muslims, not only in Kashmir, but all over the world. I'll end by just saying that just a couple of days back, there was a video of the, going around on WhatsApp and on the internet of a militant in Kashmir being asked to surrender, and the officer on the scene was telling that militant, "Beta, aa jao, fikr nahi karo, goli roko, koi goli nahi chalayega." He was talking like that. Exactly about 27 years ago, and General Sureja, who's also on this panel, will vouch for that, we were in a similar sort of situation. We were also telling a person, "Beta, aa jao, fikr nahi karo, goli nahi chalayega tujhe," and we made a militant surrender. Of course, his description should match more of terrorist because he was not a local Kashmiri, he was a Pakistani. So then once we got him, I asked him, I said, "Beta, tum surrender क्यों किया तुमने? Because हमें तो बोलते हैं कि पाकिस्तानी militant तो कोई surrender नहीं करता है." कहता साहब, हमें जब इधर भेजा गया था, हमें बोला था कि कश्मीर में आजान भी नहीं बोलना देते हैं. जो इंडियन गवर्नमेंट है कश्मीर में आजान भी नहीं बोलने देती है, और मुझे 3 महीने इधर हो गए हैं, रोज 5 बार दिन के मैं आजान सुनता हूँ. And of course, I just wanted to end with that. So thank you so much. And we look forward to the other speakers who will continue on from where I have left. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Katoch Saab, for giving us some insight of what the Pakistan's game plan then was and how it is continuing today. We have a native from Baramulla, which was the first impacted place by the raiders, and that is Professor Javed Kakroo Saab. I want Javed Kakroo Saab to give his thoughts about the raiders' rampage in 47 and 48 and what is the way forward now. Professor Javed Kakroo Saab.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks to Mr. Ashok Bhan, who has given me this chance to put forth my views on the topic, which is basically the way forward to the solution and problem of Kashmir. I thank all other participants as well, who will be a little bit of patient with me to listen what actually is happening or has happened. As far as raiders' attack on Kashmir in 1947 is concerned, I am not an eyewitness to that, or I think most of us on the panel here are not also the eyewitness. So what we have heard, we are hearing, or what we have read, we put our opinion on that source. Yes, it has happened. The raiders have attacked Kashmir in 1947. There is no two opinions about that. But I believe that while there were a lot of those things which one will not even even tolerate to hear or tolerate to listen, what those people, the raiders, which in other words were called Kabali, what they did was not even to say about those things one feels really ashamed about. But there are some other stories as well, where not only those Kabalis, but also the population of Kashmir, Muslim population in particular, who saved our brothers and sisters from other communities as well. Mr. Ashok Bhan was talking about one of the incident of Qaadi Ali Muhammad Jinnah when he came to, I have heard about this thing, that Qaadi Ali Muhammad Jinnah's Jalsa in Baramulla, that was actually disrupted by one of the person called Muhammad Maqbul Shirwani. A Muhammad Maqbul Shirwani who was from National Conference, and he was chased so that he had to jump into the river Jhelum and cross over. That was the situation as well. But people in Kashmir at that time were also saying, Hoshyar, Khabardar, Hum Kashmiri hain tayyar. उस वक्त भी कश्मीर के लोगों ने उन रेडर्स का नहीं माना, बल्कि उनके खिलाफ सफारा हो गए। यहां तक कि वो कश्मीरी, वो पाकिस्तानी, वो हिंदुस्तानी जो इस वक्त भी ये कहते हैं कि दैट नेचुरल चीज जो है वो कश्मीरियों की पाकिस्तान की तरफ थी, दरियाओं का रुख पाकिस्तान की तरफ था, कल्चर पाकिस्तान से मिलता जुलता था। हिंदुस्तान का बंटवारा अगर हुआ तो वो इसी बात पे हुआ कि मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी स्टेट्स पाकिस्तान में जाएंगे और गैर मुस्लिम जो है वो हिंदुस्तान के साथ जाएंगे। ये भी पाकिस्तान से मिलता जुलता था। लेकिन हुआ ये कि उसके बावजूद भी शेख मोहम्मद अब्दुल्ला ने मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी पाकिस्तान के साथ जाने के बजाय हिंदुस्तान के सेक्युलर सिस्टम के साथ जाने को ही तरजीह देती। अब सवाल ये पैदा होता है, नाउ द क्वेश्चन अराइजेस, मैं बान साहब से ये गुजारिश करूंगा, मेरे ख्याल में मंजूर साहब या कश्मीरी ज़बान में एक कहावत है, वो कहते हैं कि आख किस पाम पाम करें, मीनिंग दिस थिंग दैट अगर हमने सिर्फ गड़े मुर्दे ही उखाड़ने हैं, पास्ट में ही जाना है और सिर्फ ये देखना है कि पाकिस्तान ने क्या किया, हिंदुस्तान ने क्या किया, कश्मीरियों ने क्या किया, मुसलमानों ने क्या किया, हिंदुओं ने क्या किया, और ये पास्ट में जाने से हमें कुछ हासिल होने वाला नहीं है। रेडर्स के बारे में, कबायली इन्वेजन के बारे में जनरल कोटेच ने, लेफ्टिनेंट कोटेच ने, आई एम सॉरी इफ आई कैन नॉट प्रोनाउंस द नेम राइटली, आई रियली अपोलोजाइज फॉर दैट, बट आपने तो बहुत अच्छे तरीके से इसको बयान कर दिया, वहां पे कोई उसके साथ आपके साथ इख्तिलाफ करने का कोई पहलू बनता ही नहीं है। आप भी एक आर्मी मैन रहे हैं और आपको ये बात मालूम है कि जब दो दुश्मन आपस में आमने सामने हों तो गेम प्लान हर एक का होता है। पाकिस्तान की आर्मी का भी गेम प्लान हिंदुस्तान की आर्मी के खिलाफ है और हिंदुस्तान की गेम प्लान पाकिस्तान की आर्मी के खिलाफ, क्योंकि हम ये समझ रहे हैं, वी आर ऑफ द ओपिनियन, कश्मीरीज आर ऑफ द ओपिनियन, people in India, they are of the opinion, and Pakistani people in Pakistan, they are of the opinion that since 1947, Pakistan and India has been a dragger's drum. एक दूसरे के साथ लड़ रहे हैं, झगड़ रहे हैं, पिट रहे हैं। अब हिंदुस्तान और पाकिस्तान का मसला क्या है, क्यों लड़ रहे हैं? बेसिक बात वही है कि वो हिंदुस्तान भी कहता है, पाकिस्तान भी कहता है कि ये मसला हल कर दो, कश्मीर का मसला हल कर दो तो मसाइल हल हो जाएंगे। अब अगर हम इन गेम प्लानों के बारे में ही सोचते रहें और इनके बारे में ही बात करते रहे कि जो वे फॉरवर्ड की हम बात कर लेंगे, वो वे फॉरवर्ड का मसला जूं का तू वहीं पे रहता है। पाकिस्तान अपनी तावीलें दे देगा। आई वॉज जस्ट वॉचिंग ए वीडियो और एन इंटरव्यू बाय करण थापर टू पाकिस्तान इमरान खान's national security advisor, Mr. Masood, I think his name was. Mr. Masood said this thing, that whatever has happened in the past has happened. Though I don't agree with him, but the question arises here that we don't have to dig the wounds of past. We have to look forward. What is the way forward for the Kashmir issue, Kashmir problem? That first of all, we need to understand this thing, that Kashmir issue or Kashmir problem, whatever you call it, is not a religious issue. It's a political issue. हमने हर एक शख्स को अपनी जगह पे ये बात जहन में रखनी है कि the problem is there. Even General Bipin Rawat has said that militancy and military cannot issue the problem of Kashmir. The army, the security forces have done their job. Now it is the job of the politicians to decide what we have to do. Having said that, if we are digging our past, that what has been done, then there are the things which needs to be discussed as well. I believe that the Kashmiris, and in particular Kashmiri Muslims, have never been trusted by India so far. कश्मीरी लोगों के बारे में उनसे पूछिए, उनसे जानने की कोशिश कीजिए कि आप चाहते क्या हैं, what you want. वो कश्मीरी जिन्होंने 1947 में इन्वेडर्स के इन्वेजन के बाद भी सेक्युलर इंडिया की तरफ ही अपना रुझान दिखाया, और आज भी आपको ऐसे लोग वहां पे मिलेंगे जो इस बात की तरफ आपको निशानदेही करेंगे कि नहीं, हिंदुस्तान को कश्मीरियों के साथ बैठना है, बात करनी है और इस मसले का एक हल ढूंढना है। इस मसले का हल जो है वो आपने देखा कि आर्टिकल 370 की जब बात करते हैं, 5 अगस्त 2019 की जब हम बात करते हैं, उस वक्त जो कुछ कश्मीर के पास, हालांकि वो आर्टिकल 370 था ही क्या, खोखला होके रह गया था। बान साहब विल बियर मी आउट कि दैट सिंस 1953 till 2019 54 amendments were made in Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir through Article 370. वो गारंटीज खत्म हो गई थी पहले से ही। एक सिकल्टन 370 का वहां पे रह गया था, which was taken on 5th of August, though BJP fulfilled their election promise, but अगर हकीकत में आप देखेंगे वो कुछ था ही नहीं वहां पे। Everything was taken from Kashmiris before 5th of August 2019. लेकिन इस वक्त भी अगर आप देख लीजिए, इस वक्त भी सूरत हाल ये है। मैं कल एक अपने दोस्त से बात कर रहा था, उसने बड़ी अच्छी बात कही। उसने कहा कि इस वक्त हर 5 या 7 कश्मीरियों के हिफाजत के लिए या उनकी देखभाल के लिए या उनको खामोश करने के लिए एक सिपाही गन लेके खड़ा है, जबकि 5000 कश्मीरियों की देखभाल के लिए सिर्फ एक डॉक्टर है। ऐसी सूरत हाल जहां पे होती है, उस सूरत हाल को जहन में रखते हुए ये देखने की कोशिश की जाती है कि इन चीजों की तरफ किस तरह से हम ध्यान दे सकते हैं और उस चीज को हासिल किया जा सकता है जो चीज इस मसले को जड़ से ही खत्म कर दे। अब एक बात जो मेरे जहन में आती है वो ये आती है, जब मैंने ट्रस्ट की बात की, इश्यूज हैं कश्मीर के अंदर, खासकर वैली के अंदर इस वक्त जो सोशल इश्यूज हैं उनकी तरफ ध्यान देने की जरूरत है। आप आम कश्मीरी से पूछ लीजिए, आम कश्मीरी से मेरी मुराद है वो कश्मीरी जो सुबह निकलता है, रेड़े पे फल फ्रूट बेचता है, शाम को 200-300 रुपए कमा के घर आता है, वो क्या चाहता है? आप ना उन पॉलिटिकल पार्टी या उन इंडिविजुअल्स को ना पूछें जो वन वे और द अदर वे उस एक चीज को प्रोजेक्ट करते हैं, उस एक चीज की तरफदारी करते हैं जो चीज उनके हक में। अब कश्मीर के लोगों ने पिछली दफा एक बात पे बड़ी जबरदस्त खुशी का इजहार किया, दैट वाज that in every district now 14 members will be elected as an district development board members who will be given the charge and who will be given every developmental authority, and the funds will be allotted to them so that they will do the developmental things. Everybody has welcomed it. क्यों वेलकम नहीं करेंगे उस चीज को जो एक सही सिमत की तरफ एक कदम। बट उसके साथ ही आप ये भी देख लीजिएगा कि वो चीजें जो ये कहते हैं कि भाई 370 खत्म होने के बाद, इट्स ऑन रिकॉर्ड, अमित शाह जी ने बिल्कुल पार्लियामेंट में ये कहा कि अब वहां पे डेवलपमेंट होगी, अब वहां पे करप्शन खत्म हो जाएगा, अब आसमान से लोग आएंगे और कश्मीर इतना इकोनॉमिकली आगे जाएगा कि हम तसव्वुर ही नहीं कर सकते। व्हाई इज दैट? कहां पे वो चीजें हैं? नहीं है, किसी जगह नहीं है। हर एक शख्स को आप यहाँ पे जो भी दिल्ली में बैठ के थिंक टैंक्स, दिल्ली में बैठ के वो पीपल, द पीपल हु आर एट द हेल्म ऑफ अफेयर्स, हम लोग यहाँ पे बैठे हुए इस बात की तरफ हमने तवज्जो करनी है कि अब वो जमाना नहीं रहा जब इंफॉर्मेशन पहुंचने में साल लगते थे। आज अभी काम ही नहीं हुआ होता है तो आपको पता चल जाता है क्या हुआ क्या नहीं हुआ। कश्मीर के लोग अब वो लोग नहीं रहे हैं जिनको आप कहते थे कि ये अंधी तकलीद करने वाले लोग हैं, नो, अब वो रैशनली देख रहे हैं कि क्या सही है क्या गलत है। और मैं आपको ये बात बता दूं, कश्मीर के अंदर लोग ये भी महसूस करते हैं कि पाकिस्तान जो खुद को नहीं संभाल सकता, जो अपनी प्रॉब्लम्स को देख नहीं सकता, वो कश्मीर की प्रॉब्लम को क्या देखेगा। ये भी वहां पे एक सोच इस वक्त है। लेकिन उसके साथ साथ वो ये भी महसूस करते हैं कि वो हिंदुस्तान, जो हिंदुस्तान ये कहता है कि कश्मीर मेरा अटूट अंग है, कश्मीरी मेरे बाशिंदे हैं, कश्मीरी मेरे सिटीजन्स हैं, उनका कहना और उनका करना इसमें कितना तजाद है। कश्मीरी ये भी समझते हैं कि अगर किसी शख्स ने चोरी की है, किसी शख्स ने अवाम का खून चूसा है, किसी शख्स ने रोशनी एक्ट में जमीन ग्रैब की है, किसी शख्स ने किसी और तरीके का इम्प्लीमेंट किया हुआ है, उनको बाज़ाबिता तौर पर आना चाहिए अवाम के सामने। न कि ये होना चाहिए कि भाई आप दिल्ली आ जाओ, हमारे साथ बात करो, हम जो आपको कहेंगे वो करो, और बाकी जो आपकी चोरियां चकारियां हैं उन पे हम पर्दा डाल देंगे। अगर ये सूरत हाल रहती है तो मैं ये समझता हूं, कश्मीरी ये समझते हैं कि कश्मीरी बजाय हिंदुस्तान के साथ वो रवैया इख्तियार करने के बजाय शायद दूर ही होते जा रहे हैं। आप तमाम हजरात, all the panelists are of the opinion that the alienation in Kashmir towards India is increasing day by day. It has increased. What is the problem? क्या वजह है? सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि हम कश्मीरी लोगों तक नहीं पहुंच रहे। मैं जब कश्मीरी लोगों की बात कर रहा हूं, आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग ओनली अबाउट द कश्मीरी मुस्लिम्स, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द कश्मीरी हिंदूज। कश्मीरी हिंदूज का सबसे बड़ा कहना कि हमें कश्मीर से निकाला गया, हम वहां से बेघर हो गए, हम अपने वतन में ही रिफ्यूजी हो गए। राइट दे आर, वो गलत नहीं है, वो सही है। उस चीज को देखना है, उस चीज की तरफ हमने तवज्जो देनी है कि ये क्यों हुआ। जब हम सोसाइटल चेंज की बात करते हैं, सोसाइटल चेंज कबायली जब आए उस वक्त भी हुआ, वो कबायली अब पाकिस्तानी फौज ने लाए, पाकिस्तानी का गेम प्लान था, क्या था, उसकी ज्यादा से ज्यादा बेहतरीन तरीके से मिस्टर कटोच साहब और जहां पे हमारे पास यहाँ पे एक्स आर्मी जनरल्स बैठे हुए हैं, वो इसकी बाज़ाब्ता तौर पर एक सही पिक्चर बता सकते हैं। लेकिन मैं पहले भी गुजारिश कर चुका हूं, अर्ज कर चुका हूं कि कश्मीर एक सियासी मसला है, इसको मिलिटेंसी खत्म नहीं कर सकती, इसको मिलिट्री खत्म नहीं कर सकती, कश्मीरियों तक पहुंचने की जरूरत है। यू हैव टू आस्क देम। और किस कश्मीरी से पूछने की जरूरत है? आम कश्मीरी से पूछने की जरूरत है। यहाँ पे भान साहब ने मेरा तारुफ कराते हुए ये बात वो भूल गए कि बरतानिया में, यहाँ पे यूके में, मैं कश्मीर वॉइस इंटरनेशनल का सेक्रेटरी, और कश्मीर वॉइस इंटरनेशनल इस बात पे जोर देती है, हम ये कहते हैं कि इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे कश्मीर को बनाने की जरूरत इसलिए नहीं है कि कश्मीर एक सियासी मसला है और इसका हल, अगर आप पाकिस्तान से बात नहीं करते हैं, ना करें, कश्मीरियों के साथ तो करें। अब आप ये कहते हैं कि कश्मीर के साथ हम किसके साथ बात कर लेंगे? फारूक अब्दुल्ला के साथ बात करें, महबूबा मुफ्ती के साथ बात करें, गनी लोन साहब के फर्जंद सजाद लोन के साथ बात कर लें, या हुर्रियत कॉन्फ्रेंस या सेपरेटिस्ट, जो कुछ भी आप उनको नाम दे दें, उनके साथ बात कर लें। किसके साथ बात करें तो बात किसके साथ करें? अगर आप देखेंगे तो कश्मीर के अंदर जो भी आपकी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, और वो पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज जो वहां की इलाकाई पार्टीज हैं, नेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस है, पीडीपी है, बाकी चीजें हैं, ये आप देख लीजिएगा। ये मेरे ख्याल में हमारे एक पैनलिस्ट यहाँ पे भी हैं, मिस्टर बख्शी साहब, जो जम्मू से हैं, मिस्टर शर्मा, B.K. शर्मा साहब, उनका एक मैं वीडियो देख रहा था, एक्स डिप्लोमेट जो थे पाकिस्तान के दिल्ली में, मिस्टर बासित साहब, उनके साथ। तो शर्मा साहब ने एक बात कही थी कि जब बासित ने उनसे ये कहा था कि हमने पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स को रिलीज करने में हम ये नहीं देखते हैं कि शबीर शाह को रिलीज किया गया, यासीन मलिक को रिलीज किया गया, तो उन्होंने ये कहा था कि वो एक सेक्ट के लोग हैं, उनकी उतनी पजीराई नहीं है, उसके बारे में उन्होंने, शर्मा साहब ने ये बात कही थी। तो जो वहां के हमारे मेन स्ट्रीम लीडर्स, उनके बारे में अगर बात की जाए, आज अगर आप उनको देखें, दे आर ऑल डिसग्रंटेड पीपल, उनको कोई पूछता नहीं है। और इस हकीकत को अगर जानना है तो देख लीजिए, कश्मीरी अवाम से पूछ लीजिए, और कश्मीरी अवाम से एक आम से आदमी को आप फारूक अब्दुल्ला, महबूबा मुफ्ती के आगे खड़ा कीजिए और देख लीजिएगा कि कश्मीरी अवाम किसके साथ जाती है, किसके हक में जाती है। तो मेरे कहने का मतलब ये है, जो वे फॉरवर्ड के बारे में जब हम बात करते हैं, मैंने उसी वे फॉरवर्ड पे ही बात की है पूरी अपनी। मैं ये समझता हूं, कश्मीरी ये समझते हैं कि उन तक पहुंचने की जरूरत है, उन्हें ये कहने की जरूरत है, उनसे ये जानने की जरूरत है कि व्हाट एक्चुअली यू वांट। आपको याद होगा कि अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने भी कहा था कि दैट स्काई इज द लिमिट। कश्मीर एक मसला है, आपको, हमको, हम सबको ये बात तस्लीम करनी है। अगर ये मसला नहीं है तो इसके बारे में बात ही नहीं होती। अगर ये मसला,
प्लीज कंक्लूड नाउ।
तो मैं बान साहब थोड़ा सा इस पे कंक्लूजन की तरफ आता हूं। जैसे कहा मैंने कि दैट कश्मीर इज अ पॉलिटिकल प्रॉब्लम, it needs to be given a due attention. The people of Kashmir, and when I speak the people of Kashmir, I am talking about the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They should be asked what you want. And if India and Pakistan are not going to sit and solve this issue, and why should they sit and solve the issue of those people who are not being even asked what they want? Let India approach to the Kashmiris. Let India ask the Kashmiri people, come on, let us sit and let's solve the problem. और सबसे बड़ी बात मैं समझता हूं कि वो जो वहां पे जो इश्यूज हैं, जो तहफुजात हैं, जो लोग समझते हैं कि दिल्ली में हुकूमतें हमारे खिलाफ ये कदम उठा रही है, वो सही है या गलत है, उन तहफुजात को एड्रेस करने की जरूरत है, उन पे बात करने की जरूरत है, और लोगों को बताने की जरूरत है कि नो, आपके ये तहफुजात सही हैं और ये तहफुजात गलत हैं। लेट इंडिया, लेट कश्मीरी लीडरशिप, वो लीडरशिप जो वहां की नेशनल लीडरशिप है या वहां की इलाकाई लीडरशिप है, चाहे वो सेपरेटिस्ट हों, चाहे वो मेन स्ट्रीम लीडर्स हों, उनको सच बताने की जरूरत है। लेट देम स्पीक द ट्रुथ, कि कश्मीरी अवाम के सामने हकीकत क्या है, सच्चाई क्या है। और ये मैं आपको जाते जाते ये बात बता दूं, वो ये है कि कश्मीरी हिंदुस्तान के खिलाफ नहीं है, कश्मीरी हिंदुस्तान की उन इकदाम के खिलाफ है जो किए जा रहे हैं। कश्मीरी पाकिस्तान के हक में नहीं है, कश्मीरी मुसलमान पाकिस्तान के हक में नहीं है। वो समझते हैं, वो ये जानते हैं कि जो मुल्क अपनी परेशानियों को दूर नहीं कर सकता है, वो हमारी परेशानी क्या दूर कर लेगा। मैं चाहूंगा कि अगर इसके बाद कोई सवाल भी पूछे मुझसे तो उसका जवाब।
थैंक यू प्रोफेसर साहब,
थैंक यू वेरी मच।
You have said too many important things, and what I could discern was that the new narrative of the young age of Kashmir is development, and new narrative of Kashmir's young age is to bridge the trust deficit which has been created.
Definitely.
Leaders like Farooq Abdullahs and Mahbooba Muftis and there is a need to reach out to Kashmiri opinion. And lastly, you said that Kashmiri Mussalman is not for Pakistan. They feel that Pakistan is a failed country for itself and its own people. How can Kashmiris get attracted to Pakistan, which is a failed state? Thank you for these words and very good, very exhaustive narrative and articulation you have presented. Now, I would turn to a lady who is from Kashmir and who is a professor and a research scholar. And she will give us some account of her opinion about the massacre and rampage in POK and Punch sector of in 1947 when raiders came about. And then if she has some thoughts for the way out in 10 to 12 minutes. Dr. Manmeet Bali Nagji, please, floor is yours. You are not audible, Manmeet.
Sir, I'm just unmuting her. Just give me a minute.
Yes, sir. So I'm unmuted now. Yes,
Yeah.
I was muted actually. A very good evening to all the panelists and all the distinguished guests here. I'm full of gratitude towards General B.K.Sharma sir, General Katoch, and Bhan sir. Actually, my representation here is on twin aspects of one that on an academic and professional front, I am representing Manav Rachna Center for Peace and Sustainability, which is a Manav Rachna University Center of Excellence. And we strive towards strategic, peace, and ramifications of it are also deliberated upon. I belong to Pulwama, so being a Kashmiri Sikh, a Sikh from Kashmir, I have grown up listening to the stories of Kabaili raid, as it is called in our circles. And I am a direct, the first person account I have heard from my grandfather, who was in Kingsway refugee camp for at least 5 months after the Kabaili raid happened, when he just got onto a rickety Dakota plane and he was in Delhi amongst the refugees. My mother's maternal house was razed to the ground in Badgam. They lost everything. They were the Zeldars and Chakdars of Shogapura village in Badgam. So we have actually, our women had to be, they were smeared with mud on the faces, and that's how they saved themselves. And many were abducted, taken away, and there have been reunions now again. The village of Ichama in Kashmir, Badgam, they set up their own barricades. And these are some things which I'm not touching upon as of now. But being a Kashmiri Sikh, I am taking into account the Sikhs of Muzaffarabad and Mirpur and the Hindus of that area who bore the brunt of this brutal massacre and genocide. So I would be sharing a presentation here because it has some pictures, the present day pictures also, thanks to Amardeep Singh, who has written a very good account of the lost heritage of Sikhs in Pakistan. So I have taken a few pictures from his blog site, and that's what I'm going to share, and also the account, which has already been actually deliberated upon by General Katoch also, but still I'm going to put forth my views. So sharing the presentation here. So I hope it's visible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So as it is self-explanatory, the Mirpur Muzaffarabad massacre of 1947, the prologue, as had been suggested by General Katoch, was that it was a religion-based communal partition of August 1947 when the Radcliffe Line triggered the violence across communities, and how the tribal raid of J&K, which was unleashed by Pakistan, was a diabolical, fraught with fraud and unethical, unprecedented brutality and savagery with a strategic intent of capturing Kashmir. What is the problem now? The problem is that Muzaffarabad and Mirpur has remained a blind spot for decades now, And nobody has really talked about these people and their woes. But we are not scratching the wounds as of now, but we need to take into account today, 22nd October, when the Muzaffarabad massacre actually happened. So we need to go back in history and understand what happened and what did these people face as a minority. And the question still stays imminent today in wake of the Kashmiri Pandit exodus, in wake of the Kashmiri Sikhs staying in Kashmir who are, on a very thin, walking a very tightrope situation in Kashmir at times, and still they are chastised. What is the timeline of the tribal invasion? As we know that the Mountbatten plan had set up the agenda for the partition. There was, as General Katoch said, there was a no tax campaign in Poonch, and the killings in Poonch had already started when pro-Pakistani groups had tried to hoist a Pakistani flag to mark independence from India. So, as I wouldn't be going into the details of this, so Operation Gulmarg had already been chalked and drafted in order to, with a twin agenda again. First was to fortify the brigands and the rebels of Poonch with all the ammunition and all the supplies. And second was to set up an army of tribal raiders from Northwest Frontier Province, and also the army servicemen who were actually in disguise. So the rebels had clashed at a place called Thurar, and this set the stage for besiege of Poonch. They attacked Muzaffarabad on 22nd of October, and Sardar Ibrahim, who was a pro-Pakistan landlord from Poonch, he had already announced Jammu and Kashmir, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, at a place called Palandri, and he had appointed himself as its head. Now, what happened? What did the rulers of the day do? 26th October, the Maharaja of Kashmir, who dilly-dallied the accession to India, and the precious time was lost because of maybe the demographic composition of his state, and also he was presumably under duress. So it actually gave a lot of time to the tribals to actually unleash terror and unleash barbaric atrocities on the helpless minorities of Muzaffarabad and Mirpur. Indian troops had started coming in on 27th October, but there was a slip between the cup and the lip, which I will again explain in the other. Now, what was the paradox of Riyasat? We have already understood that it was a state which was a composition of many communities, and Mirpur and Muzaffarabad became a no man's land between Pakistan and India, because the British strategic ploy was also to give some bit of Kashmir to Pakistan and some bit of it to India with their great game in mind. So taking advantage of this confusion, on 21st October, tribesmen in disguise Pak Army, who were basically from the tribes of the Waziristan tribes, Masood tribes, Turi, Afridi, Mohammed, and Malakan Yusufzais. They passed the Khyber province and they were carrying axes and swords. And this is a very sketchy graph of how far Baramulla is from Muzaffarabad. So it took them 37 hours to walk towards Baramulla from Muzaffarabad after unleashing the terror. Now, again, I will speak from my perspective and my placement as a Sikh. Sikh lineage in Muzaffarabad goes back to the times of Guru Har Gobind, the sixth Guru, and it is situated between Jhelum and Neelam rivers in the area, which is also called the Kishan Ganga River. Prior to partition, the valley of Muzaffarabad and the areas of Balakot and Ramkot, they had a lot of Sikhs, a large Sikh population. Historical Gurdwara still stays there, and it is in ramshackle condition, as is the condition of all other Gurdwaras in Pakistan, except for Nankana Sahib and perhaps Panja Sahib, which is of strategic importance and political importance to Pakistan as well. Now I'll share some pictures, what happened to the Gurdwara. This is the Gurdwara. This is a wall of the Gurdwara, courtesy Amardeep photography blog. This remains of the heritage of Sikhs in Muzaffarabad. This is their langar hall. This is what remains. And this is a graphic. This is a brief sketch of how from Gadi Habibullah the onslaught happened when they moved downwards towards Muzaffarabad, and the garrison of the Jammu Raja actually fled. So that is how the helpless citizens of Muzaffarabad were left to their own mercy, to the mercy of the tribal raiders. Massacre, how did it happen? They were flushed when they killed people and they looted and rampaged after descending from Gadi, and they were flushed with victory. And they went on to wanton looting and arson. They asked the people in Arabic language to recite the kalma, which has been happening since centuries. And whoever couldn't do that was killed. Many non-Muslim women, including Sikh and Hindu women, were enslaved. They were raped. And till date, we find abducted women, tracing their roots back to Kashmir. In fact, Kashmiri Sikh women, some of the families have got they had a reunion recently. The streets were littered with signs of mayhem, and it was unprecedented brutality. They killed whoever they could find, and then the column drove towards the Jhelum River. Now, this is the ill-fated Dumail Bridge, where over 300 Sikhs who were they didn't know where they are going actually when the garrison has already fled. There's nobody, there's no army to save them, and the Pashtun tribals are just killing them or raping them or looting them. 300 Sikhs were shot at point blank range on this bridge. This is another view of that same bridge. What is written about 21st and 22nd October today. 300 male Sikhs from the surrounding valleys were rounded up at Ranveer Singh Bridge. It is called the Dumail Bridge as the river Jhelum and Neelam join here. It's Dumail. It is in Muzaffarabad. Amardeep Singh had gone back to trace his roots actually to this place and wanted to bring some soil from this place, but he couldn't do so. He just couldn't bear the sight of it. So then they actually, it has already been touched upon how they moved on to Baramulla from Titwal and reached Kupwara and then Baramulla. Maharaja's army had, as I have been saying, had left. So I have already, touched upon the aspects of how Badgam and Berwa villages of Ichhama set up barricades and night vigils. And that is how they could save themselves, and many got killed. That part of history is actually untouched in Kashmir. The Sikhs of Kashmir who also got killed. Now this is a picture of the Qabilis, and this is from the archives. What is written on the picture actually makes sense. The invasion not only traumatized a previously well-settled and peaceful Kashmiri society of all communities, it set a disastrous pattern for India-Pakistan relations till date. We are bearing the brunt of the same problem, the same tribal invasion, and that is what we are actually not able to find a clue to. Now, these are some brutalities of faith and trust. First and foremost, the Sikhs were told to cut their hair, or their hair was cut, and that is how they were, they had buried some of their belongings and their precious things in the kitchen walls. And they were later on, after even 50 years, they could find their treasures in those walls. Now coming to the Mirpur massacre. Mirpur massacre also is a twin aspect of the same massacre, but it happened a month later on November 25th. And this is also called the first Kashmir war, but normally we call it as a tribal invasion. Now this is a demography of the Mirpur province. We had the Sikh fort and Gurdwara Damdama Sahib on the north, and we had the Muslim quarter in the southwest and the Jama Masjid. 80% population of city was Hindu and Sikh, and 20 was only Muslim. Rural areas surrounding it were Muslim majority. Population was 75,000 total. Now, what had happened that when the Radcliffe line had been drawn, the people from West Punjab, they had started making a beeline to Mirpur because it was under the Hindu Raja. So there was an influx of over 10,000 Hindus and Sikhs from district Jhelum, Pakistan. And this took the numbers of Mirpur up to 25,000, only the refugees. Hindus took refuge in Arya Samaj temple and Sikhs in Damdama Sahib Gurdwara. On day of accession, what happened? 26th October 1947. Rao Ratan Singh, the DC of city of Mirpur, was cousin of Maharaja. And the Maharaja of Kashmir was stationed in Jammu. But from October 27 to November 18, Pakistanis started surrounding Mirpur, and suddenly the Muslim population of Mirpur started vacating the place. They left them to their own mercy. There was no Muslim population actually left. November 18, Sardar Patel announced that Indian army is being sent to Mirpur. However, Indian army was diverted to Kotli. to relieve some VIPs, presumably, and the road from Jhangar to Mirpur was cut off by Pakistanis, and this is how they lost contact or touch with the rest of the army and the place. Now, this is a aerial view of Gadi Habibullah and Muzaffarabad, and then the Duk Gully was the entry point to Mirpur. This is a narrow stretch of road which actually you get access to Mirpur. So this is how the siege of Mirpur happened, and it was a British strategy, of course, not to let till date Mirpuris and Muzaffarabadis were refugees without the PRC's permanent resident certificates. They were the nowhere people. The Pakistan Army conceived a military plan, as has been discussed, Operation Gulmarg, which I thought I would explain, but it's already explained in the session. Pakistan Army cut off Mirpur from Indian Army, and this is how a bus full of Hindus and Sikhs who tried to leave the city was killed on the road en route to Baramulla. Now, Mirpur is how they salvaged. There were political efforts. Not much is said about that. Mirpur is working in Jammu, and MLAs from area canvassed to Indian Army to push a stronger force to save Mirpur. Premnath Dogra, Ramlal Chaudhary, Balraj Madhok met Sheikh Abdullah, but Indian Army's resources were tied up in rescuing Srinagar. So Mirpur was actually at the altar of, it was at the bulletin of saving Kashmir or saving Srinagar. Mr. Mahajan, the erstwhile PM of JNK, went to meet Mr. Nehru, had an altercation with Nehru, refused to divert Indian Army troops from Srinagar to Mirpur. It is all anecdoted. Sardar Patel also expressed his inability to assess the situation. And the Mirpuris, they themselves fortified, and some of the Mirpuris met Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru at Jammu airport. After a 3-hour conference with Indian Army, finally Mr. Mahajan had a sit-in dharna, following which a Gorkha battalion was directed to Mirpur. Otherwise, there was nobody in Mirpur to save them. This is how the Pakistani capture of Mirpur happened, and delegation of Madhok and Mahajan after meeting Jawaharlal Nehru, the Gorkha battalions reached, but it was already too late. About 2,500 civilians retreated out of the cordon with JK Army, and rest of them, which we talked about, 75,000 people, only 2,500 could be rescued. Now, what did the Mirpuri youth do? They formed their own death squads, and they resisted. This was also a kind of last stand situation, and they withstood the soldiers on defense post, but their wireless communication broke down, which the garrison had left. And this is how the gruesome morning of November 25th happened. And Pakistan Army and tribesmen entered the city, set several parts of city on fire, causing chaos. Brutal consequences were all civilians in the siege were killed, 23,000 in Mirpur alone, 50,000 including in nearby villages of Muzaffarabad and Punch. Mass suicide of Hindu and Sikh women in the Arya Samaj Mandir as well. They just jumped into the well. The helpless women and the young girls were abducted. Till now, we don't have any traces of them. There was no actually committee set up to find them. Whole of Mirpur was dug up to loot the hidden wealth. Life and death in Ali Beg prison, which was the Gurdwara. 5,000 Hindus and Sikhs were massacred there or kept there, malnourished, ill, sick. 2,000 people only could reach Jammu via Jangir on foot, and they are till date in Jammu. You find the areas of Simbal Camp, Gol Gujral, which we consider the truck drivers of today, and we look down upon them. They are the refugees from this area, and they actually till date they did not make it big, and they were the big Jagirdars of those places. 1,600 were rescued by Red Cross, 3,400 were massacred in the camps. Now, this is a survivor tale that there was a prison guard at Ali Beg who killed his victims with a butcher's knife, chanting the Kalma, identifying himself as a soldier of Pakistan and follower of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and said he was only following the orders of his superiors, doing nothing wrong. He justified it. So what is the lost tribe, the nowhere people of Mirpuris and Muzaffarabadis? Only 790 non-Muslims were left there, and from a previous population of 1,14,000. Sardar Muhammad Ibrahim Khan, the then president of Azad Kashmir, who visited the place during event, had confirmed that Hindus were disposed of, but he did not mention any numbers. Survivors of Muzaffarabad and Mirpur are the displaced people of Jammu and Kashmir, despite being on the land of their own ancestors. And they had the twin, the Damocles sword of they not even having the PRCs. Currently Mirpur is in Pakistan, but because of the Mangala Dam started by Pakistan, initiated by Pakistan, the whole of Mirpur was submerged in water. 80% of Sikh heritage lies in tatters in the area in Pakistan, and it is lost forever to our kith and kin. Sikh heritage is in dilapidated condition across the remote areas of Pakistan, unprotected and soon to become extinct. Irony is that, this is my last slide, the irony is that the refugees of Indian Punjab and Bengal, who got everything in a way in form of compensation, land allotment, and it was settled amicably by India and Pakistan, but POK refugees still are labeled as refugees till Article 370 happened. Even if it was a caricature or a carcass of its earlier self, the article, it did give some respite to these people. They never got the status of associated benefits of internally displaced people of Jammu and Kashmir by the Jammu Kashmir government because they didn't carry the PRC. They were not given international refugee status also. They lost their relatives. They were not given anything under the UN refugee status of 1951. They did not get any benefits extended to Tibetan refugees also. So they were deprived of the benefits given to 1989 migrants also, the Kashmiri Pandits migrants. So they didn't actually get anything as long as Article 370 was in force. They weren't given PRC also. So what are the takeaways? What do we learn? As had been suggested by General Katoch, that Major General Akbar Khan, army officer widely believed to have played a pivotal role in starting invasion, he is emerged as the architect of philosophy of armed insurrection by aiding non-state actors as state proxies. He wrote the military historian, Major retired Aga Humayun Amin had written in The War of the Lost Opportunities, 1947-48 Kashmir War, that Pakistan repeats this strategy time and again. It did in 1965 during the Kashmir insurgency of 88 to till date, as well as in the Kargil War of 1999. That is, engaging the non-state actors in Afghanistan, engaging the unleashing the proxy war on Kashmir, as was suggested by the eminent panelists earlier to me, that Kashmiris need to be reached out to, and that is how we can salvage the situation. But I think till the time Pakistan, what do you say, we are not tackling it tooth and nail, we cannot really have a victory on ground, because there is high rate of radicalization among the Kashmiri youth as well. So, but instead of liberating Kashmir or taming Afghanistan, it has led to weakening. What has it happened? It has led to the weakening of political processes. It has militarized the whole area. It has not only militarized Kashmir and Afghanistan, but also Pakistan. Pakistan is a failed state today. So that is, at the end, I would like to put across the point that minorities of Kashmir are bearing again the same brunt as has been faced by the Muzaffarabadis and Mirpuris. I agree, the Muslims, it's not about communities, it's not about any communal angle to the whole situation. But I think till the time we don't get our, record straight, we don't have a peep into our inner demons, and we don't actually salvage them, and we don't resurrect from what we lost, we cannot be saving the minorities and the diversity of J&K, and we have lost it forever, I think. So let's look forward to an optimism, and let's look forward to working together towards salvaging Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you so much.
Bhan sahab, you're on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Manmeet. You have given us the most scholarly presentation, and you have given us the graphic presentation, how the Sikhs and other minorities were treated in Muzaffarabad and POK, then in Poonch, Rajouri, Badgam, and also in Baramulla. It was really an insight, research-based presentation. We are proud we have a scholarly Manmeet Bali Nag with us as our speaker, and we are delighted to hear you.
Thank you, sir.
Now I focus on my friend. He is my professional friend also. That is Manzoor Ahmed Shah, who is an advocate in UK Supreme Court. And I would request him to give us a perspective how to counter Pakistan's Kashmir narrative, because he has lived in Pakistan And so to say, if it is not offending him, he has looked and peeped into the ISI functioning, military functioning, and their agenda towards Kashmir. He can give us a better insight and also give us some points about how to counter the Pakistan's Kashmir narrative now, because he is also himself keen now to go back to Kashmir and tell Kashmiris that whatever you are dreaming of is almost chasing a mirage. And therefore, he has convinced himself that for Kashmir and for aspirational Kashmiris, India is the land of opportunities and Indian state is the land of opportunity for Kashmir. Uh, Manzoor Saab, please, now floor is yours. For 10 minutes, you can extend it by another minute or two. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bhan Sahab. I start with the Islamic greetings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace and blessings of God be upon all the panelists and the participants. I would like to also express my deep appreciation to Bhan Sahab, who has given me this opportunity to discuss this issue at this stage when Article 370 has been abrogated. So it is very important that we need to go through the pages of history so that we can learn the lessons. As the panelists, they have given the full insight of what happened in 1947. So in my opinion, in my conclusion, I think the proxy war started initially in 1947. And then it started again in the armed conflict when Pakistan started to help the militants. As you know that there was a discussion about two-nation theory, that Pakistan failed to unite Muslims in the name of Islam because you have seen the partition of Bangladesh. But we, people of subcontinent, we share same identity. We are human beings. We share 1,000 years history with each other. So two-nation theory was, unfortunately, it has completely failed. So people were misguided in the name of two-nation theory. And then you have seen that Pakistan raided Kashmir and breached the standstill agreement. And then the Maharaja was invited in Kashmir. So the Kashmir issue was created by Pakistan, in my opinion, and not by the Kashmiris, and not by India also. Because Pakistan, unfortunately, failed to accept the reality in 1947. Because when Pakistan claimed for Hindu majority princely states of Junagadh and Hyderabad, as my learned panelists, they have already discussed the book, The Raiders, which was written by Pakistani general. I would like to refer one other book written by a Pakistani ex-Prime Minister, Chaudhry Muhammad Ali, Prime Minister, who was from 1955 to 1957, who has written the book, and he has completely mentioned the failures of Pakistani leadership and the mistakes they have done in denying the two-state solution in accordance with the plans which was laid down at the time of partition. I would also refer one more book from a Pakistani author, Sardar Shaukat Hayat, who has written a book, The Nation That Lost Its Soul. He has resigned soon after when the Pakistani Prime Minister, he did not accept the offer regarding the principles agreed between Pakistan and India regarding Kashmir and Hyderabad and the princely state of Hyderabad Deccan. So unfortunately, we need to know, the Muslims in particular need to know, that it is the failure of Pakistan which has resulted in losing the Kashmir. And then we see after that, in proxy war, what Pakistan has done, that they have taken, they have propagated, they have misled the people in the name of UN resolutions. I don't know whether Pakistan is ready to leave Azad Kashmir according to resolutions. I don't think that is going to happen anyway. But the proxy war which Pakistan stated, it is against Islam. It is not teaching of Islam. As Manmeet was also saying, whatever happened in Muzaffarabad is not teaching of Islam. It is basically the people, they took things, they started propagating their own choices. So it was a proxy war. Unfortunately, we started in 1947 and it ended in 1988. And then Pakistan also tested the muscles in 65, 1972, in Kargil War also. And you have seen that it did not change anything. So unfortunately, with great regret, I have to say that this partition of India and Pakistan, it was based on hatred, Hindu-Muslim hatred. The interest of Muslims and Islam was never considered by the Muslim leaders. But at the same time, we need to also know what the Pakistan is. The Pakistani people, we have to see they are very loving people. They've got emotional attachment towards Kashmiris. And unfortunately, Pakistani leaders, the secular leaders, they have used their emotions for their political designs. The army has also used the emotions of Pakistani people and Kashmiri people for their military designs. And then we see the religious group in Pakistan who also exploit Islam. So unfortunately, in Pakistan, as you can see that people are suffering as a result of this unending Kashmir war. They could not abolish feudalism in their country. And you can see the war clouds always there. People are in fear, political instability. Economically, you know that Pakistan has high inflation. They are in debts because they are spending wars. And you have seen the current instability, political instability. So Pakistan is facing grave problems because of Kashmir issue. And also we need to expand them. We need to expand the Pakistani people so that they can rise. They can tell their politicians and military that anti-India hatred cannot go forever. Because they failed to capture Kashmir in 1947, they cannot now continuously destroy now their people and the people of Kashmir under the pretext of UN resolutions. So as everyone knows, Pakistan has social problems, economic problems, political problems. And if the Pakistan continues like that, I think now their future is not whether it will be a democracy or military rule. In my opinion, that Pakistan may lose their status in the relation of in the global community because they have failed so far to realize their mistakes. They have to come to reality. They have to start the politics. So after this abolition of 370, in my opinion, that both India, Pakistan, and Kashmiris, they can achieve new opportunities for their people. Opportunities never end. When one opportunity is lost, other is created. Because we have seen what happened for the last 72 years. We had Article 370. What benefit was achieved by the Kashmiris? As you have seen that Kashmiris, they lost everything so far. You have seen the people, they're suffering the trauma. People are suffering from psychological and psychiatric issues. And we have also committed the commercial suicide. We have destroyed our economy. People are living in fear. And as you have seen now, our children are not going to school. So the time is coming where we are seeing the illiterate population of Kashmir. At the same time, our qualified people, who are learned people from Kashmir, they are leaving the Kashmir. So I think what our Kakroo Sahab has said, we need to also address our Kashmiris. We need to also understand the unrealistic dreams, because we have so far listened to the empty slogans of our so-called leaders, and also the emotionally driven movement, which was at the behest of Pakistan. So it has taken us to a destructive path. They have misled us. They are not lovers of Muslims and Islam. So they want to continue their endless war in Kashmir, because it will continue Pakistani army to control their people, because they want to control their country, and that's the only pretext they can do. So Pakistan and Kashmiris also, we need to understand that we have to come to reality. We are powerless. We can't fight with India for nothing, because it is a now wishful thinking, because we have to find the path of peace and progress. That's the only solution, because we have seen the destruction of last 32 years. And in reality, where our Kashmiris were also given that, oh, it is an Islamic jihad. It is an Islamic movement. We have to think twice. You have seen the 1400 ulamas of Pakistan. They have given the fatwa that there can be no jihad without state. And unfortunately, they have misled Kashmiris by saying in 1990, from 1980, oh, it is Islamic jihad. So we have to also account our Kashmiri leaders who are self-styled leaders. They have to, in my opinion, repent to God, and they have to ask the forgiveness from the people. And Kashmiri people, they have to rise above the leaders. They have to make a realistic choice, understand the baseless movement, which was started by Pakistan. So we need to also see the abolition of Article 370 can give us great opportunities. As a lawyer, in my opinion, Article 370 was completely discriminatory. It has taken so many rights from Kashmiri people. And in my opinion, it was against the Islam also, because it has taken out the rights of Kashmiri women. So now I think the time has come. If we realize, we Kashmiris, we are the subject matter of this issue, we need to understand our own mistakes. And also at the same time, we need to also convey the message to Pakistani public that their policies were wrong so far. They have taken a new approach to this issue. They have to recognize the reality. They should not now fight for something which they have lost in 1947. So if their leaders will start the politics of possible, I think there is still a chance that we can still bring peace in India and Pakistan. And all these three countries, all the India, Pakistan, and Kashmiris can start living in peace, because Pakistan desperately needs peace also. I think if they start the peace with India, I think the doors of development will start. It will open new doors for everyone, for Kashmiris, for India, and for the Pakistan. But so far as India is concerned, I think we need to also build a narrative of, we need to change the thinking of Kashmiri people. We have to explain them the reality, that how they can be better off in India rather than with Pakistan or being an independent state. We need to tell our Kashmiri brothers that independence, the political independence means nothing now, because these are only political structures. No country in the world is independent 100%. If you see 195 countries, more than 50 Muslim countries, all these countries, they have gained their independence after long struggle. But in actual sense, none of the country is independent, because you can see the globalization, social media. Now you are in India, we are in the UK. We can speak to each other, we can share our ideas. So we need to change the thinking of our Kashmiri people. And we need to tell them there's nothing wrong to stay in India. It can be a source of goodness for Muslims and non-Muslims also. And for the India, I think Kashmir is the main barrier in their development and progress. So as Javed Sahib has rightly said, we need to recognize the loss of innocent Kashmiris. And we need to speak to all stakeholders in Kashmir. Whether they are anti-India, anti-Pakistan, we need to give them a chance so that they can understand how they can benefit with India than with Pakistan or independent state. So we had to take a new approach. We had to also think that India is a diverse political union. India is bigger than Pakistan. It has 1,000 years history, shared history with people of Kashmir and with Pakistan. So in order to resolve this issue, we need to speak to Kashmiris. We need to speak to all leaders. And also, in my opinion, we need to release all political prisoners. And we need to give general amnesty and give them a chance so that Kashmiris can understand that India is their future. And if we do that, India will also be better internationally recognized, because India can aspire for becoming a new superpower. And if we resolve this Kashmir issue, I think the rest of Indian people will also benefit from this, because then India will not spend money in security, and it can spend money and resources for the welfare of their people. So it is my sincere wish that our deliberation of today will help us, I think, long path of sustainable peace in Kashmir, and also it will ultimately bring prosperity and progress in India and Pakistan. And both countries will flourish and benefit each other in education, culture, and economy. And I hope that the chapter of long-standing hatred will be closed forever. I would like to say thank you once again to all participants and to all panelists. Thank you very much.
Bhan Sahib, you're on mute.
Thank you, Manzoor Saab. You have highlighted a couple of points which are very important. And the main point is that Pakistan is a failed state. It has no resources. Internationally, it is failing. And domestically also, it is failing. And how long can army sustain them? There is a political instability and there is a feudal order in Pakistan. Therefore, it is incumbent on Kashmiris to realize and understand and make them understand that Kashmir has no future with Pakistan or being independent. It has only the best of its future with India. And you said after abrogation of Article 370, new vistas of opportunities have opened for Kashmir, and you can play some role in asking Kashmiris, requesting Kashmiris to see reason and then mainstream themselves towards the Indian Union and Indian civilization, be part of Indian civilization. I indeed am grateful to you for your presentation. Now I request one of the sons of the soil who is a professional doctor and who treats and cures cancer of human beings, and he is attempting to cure the cancer of the militancy and also instability in Kashmir. And he is, by his activities as a social activist, trying to reinforce the idea of development, idea of India, and idea of democracy in Kashmir. Dr. Ashraf Saab, please, it is your floor. Give us your thoughts.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Uh, I was I was really a little bit depressed after hearing to Dr. Manmeet, but thank God that Mustaq Saab started his presentation and gave a pragmatic version and in his
Manzoor,
talk.
Manzoor.
Dr. Manzoor Saab, I'm sorry. And this sort of uplifted my mood in a sense. Now, I had to actually talk about the societal response to Pakistan proxy war. I think I will better do a sort of a recapitulation of what has been already said by the panelists here. I'm not going to dig very deep into the history because there have been in the history there have been many things which have been very cruel, very sordid, and very bad. Uh, but the topic of societal response to Pakistan proxy war, or for that matter, societal response to any challenge, is a complex undertaking for any society. Kashmir is no exception to that. All societies are rooted in historical moorings that put checks and balances on the behavior of a society and its institutions. But the history basically needs to be understood in a proper perspective. I concur with that with. Before we talk about Pakistan and societal response from Kashmir, let me recall Ernest Rena. He wrote more than a century ago, and I quote, "Getting history wrong is an essential part of being a nation." Now, this is a fact, historically, also culturally, also, and politically, also. Like all nations, Pakistan has lived uh, with this historical dilemma right from its beginning and still continues to do so. When you get history wrong, you need to manufacture stories, and stories need conflicts to feed on. And if there are no conflicts, you manufacture ones. No wonder the Kashmir conflict was a necessity for the survival of a manufactured history. Now, as you know, Pakistan grew out of a separatist ideology propounded by the Aligarh movement of 1877 in the aftermath of 1857 mutiny. Its ideology was rooted in fear, some imaginary also and some real also, of the Urdu-speaking elite of North India. The Muslim League emerged as a political wing that gave expression to that fear, which had primarily gripped the hearts and the minds of the elite Muslim minority that had tasted power and politics up until 1857. All of a sudden, they were dethroned and the restlessness set in. On 14th of August, let me recall, the restlessness culminated in partition, claiming more than 1 million lives and 10 million as migrants in that one country of 13th night. Now, the citizens of new country, Pakistan, were required to identify with one religion and one language, Urdu, originally spoken by a small minority. The tone was set for a cascade of perpetual complications. Additionally, to Pakistan's problems, Afghanistan refused to recognize northwest frontier province of Pakistan, and Pakistan felt doubly threatened as Pashtuns cultivated good relations with India. Now, I'm not going to talk about uh, what is not actually in the public domain. In this talk, I'm going to specifically focus on what is available in the public domain written by the Pakistani authors about the whole story, so that lest it may seem that it is a unilateral sort of a version of the story. On 15th of August, Jammu and Kashmir was the only princely state, as has been already discussed by panelists, that remained out of the ambit of either dominion. It is important to note here that it was Pakistan government that stopped the supplies to Jammu and Kashmir by cutting off the rail communication. Chaos ensued, and amidst the chaos, on 22nd October, as has been already said, the tribal raiders, supported by Pakistani officers, attacked Kashmir, captured POK, and relentlessly pushed towards Srinagar. Baramulla was captured, and the raiders, as per the witnesses' accounts, went berserk. Loot, arson, and killings sent shudders through the spines of the people. The tribals collected samawars. Now, these are the stories which are still circulating in Kashmir. And I have heard this story and this type of stories from my elders, that the tribals collected samawars, broke them, keeping the brass handles, obviously mistaking brass for gold to carry back home. Now, such were the intentions of these tribals. On 27th, Maharaja put his signature on the draft of the instrument of accession, and Government of India, as we know, sent the troops to repel the tribals and reconquer the captured positions like Baramulla and Uri. Now, 3 days later, Government of Pakistan also deployed troops, but by then the Indian troops had already gained ground. When the matter went to the Security Council, India was asked to arrange a plebiscite. But the plebiscite was to take place after Pakistan withdrew troops from the POK, which they never did. So that is how the whole story started. The debacle now in 1947 was not to be the first and the last confrontation. Many more things were to follow then. Mr. Bhutto coordinated a major proxy initiative in mid-1950s, codenamed Operation Gibraltar. It was the covert operation aimed at creating an insurgency in Kashmir in the aftermath of the Holy Relic episode and this episode emboldened Pakistan. In 1965, 40,000 armed and trained infiltrators were pushed across the line of control into this site. And these are the data which have been presented by Pakistani authors, and it is in the public domain. The plan was that these Pakistanis will get mingled with the local population and incite them to rebellion. Guerrilla warfare was to be set in by destroying bridges, communication networks, logistic installations, highways, tunnels, etc. Meanwhile, another force, Ghaznavi Force, a special operation unit of Pakistan Army, was set up to infiltrate via Rajouri. However, this whole Operation Gibraltar got botched up because Kashmiris did not cooperate with them as they expected them to. Rather, they provided information to Indian Army. The failure of this covert operation culminated in another war. Pakistan again lost the war, but it had managed to leave the cinders smoldering. Now, in 1973, another twist took place. Sardar Dawood in Afghanistan deposed his cousin Zahir Shah and began to promote Pakhtun nationalism and came closer to USSR at that time. Bhutto, at that time, deputed General Baba to identify opponents to Kabul regime. In 1974, Colonel Imam of ISI was deputed to train the youth in guerrilla warfare there in Afghanistan. Burhanuddin Rabbani, who established Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan, and his students, Gulbuddin Hikmatyar and Ahmad Shah Massoud, and others were trained as guerrilla commanders. These men were recommended to the Americans as candidates to check USSR influence. Now, General Zia gave this strategy a new dimension under the mentorship of, as you know, Abu Ala Maududi, because both of them were the Muhajirs. So they had a good equation. 7 groups were identified at that time to receive the American aid through Pakistan. They formed an umbrella organization called Islamic Unity of Afghan Mujahideen. It was in 1985 with the headquarters in Peshawar. Now, Dini Madaris were also established with money pouring in from America to train the youth in jihad. During the same time, bin Laden joined in and brought huge monies from Saudi Arabia. In 1982, bin Laden, along with the CIA, and it is already in the public domain. I'm not saying that it is written by some, for example, some from this part of the LOC. This is already in the public domain in Pakistan. In 1982, bin Laden, along with CIA, built a huge network of roads and tunnels in host area where training camps were set. Now, in 1989, sorry, after 10 years of war, Soviets were ultimately driven out. Hikmatyar was put in charge, but he turned out to be ineffective. He was replaced by Taliban at the insistence of DG of ISI, Javed Ashraf Qazi. Javed Ashraf Qazi, yes. The Taliban were these Taliban. Who were these Taliban? They were the student warriors trained in Devbandi madrasas run by Jamaat-e-Islami. The driving out of USSR was an ideological victory for Jamaat-e-Islami and Jamiyat-e-Ulama-e-Islam. Now, that is being run this time by Fazlur Rahman. He is the head of JUI. Afghanistan under Taliban became a hub of training camps targeted at Kashmir. Now, the training facilities for Kashmiri Mujahideen were shifted wholesale to Afghanistan under the Harkatul Ansar. Now, the Afghan job was done. Now, the attention was to be directed to Kashmir. In 1990s, the armed guerrillas or the militants were infiltrated into Kashmir far more robustly and with well-planned strategy to bleed India slowly. Now, Ahmed Rashid in his book, Pakistan on Brink, explains this strategy in the words of an army general who was involved in this plan. And he says that this strategy kept 7 lakh Indian troops and paramilitary forces in Kashmir at a very low cost to Pakistan. At the same time, it ensured that the Indian army could not threaten Pakistan and create enormous expenditures for India, and also keep it bogged down in military and political terms. This is what has been written by Ahmed Rashid in his book, and he has quoted a general who has been supposedly, allegedly involved in formulating this strategy. Now, the question is, why did Pakistan choose this strategy? Now, in contrast to the Afghan policy, Kashmir policy of Pakistan was aimed less at conquering the territory, and it's still aimed less at conquering the territory and more at outsourcing low-intensity conflict to militant groups. It was a wiser strategy concocted by ISI after 3 defeats. The strategy makes easier for Pakistan army to deny remote controlling operations in Kashmir. But whenever Pakistan army has found itself in situations of more or less subordinate position to civilian government, it doesn't shy away from limited belligerence to sabotage any peace initiative. Kargil War is an example of that, as has been already mentioned by Professor Manmeet, Professor Dr. Manmeet Ji. Musharraf, at that time, General Musharraf saw it fit to undermine Nawaz Vajpayee peace process. Nawaz Sharif, it seems, wasn't even formally briefed until after the start of a limited war. Again, the result was unexpected for Pakistan. It lost to India and Nawaz lost to Musharraf. Now, for 40 years, Kashmir has been witnessing mayhem, killings, and low-intensity warfare with huge costs in terms of life, blood, and livelihood. Everybody knows that. This is high time now to put the things in proper perspective and initiate discussions, dialogue, and interactions amongst us in Kashmir. Because any proper societal response will have to take into account history. And historically, this subcontinent was known for strong society with a weak state. But with the creation of Pakistan, the balance tipped towards state. And in Pakistan, the state became not only strong, but powerful. That was a dangerous shift, not only for Pakistan, but for India too. It works like induction magnetism to easily push India to follow the suit. A strong Pakistan is good, not only for Pakistan, but also for the subcontinent. But a powerful Pakistani state is a dangerous thing, and it is dangerous more for the people of Pakistan than for the subcontinent. So here's the point. Keeping in view the genuine history, Kashmiri society has to learn a lesson and adapt pragmatic approach. But much will depend on the intention of the government of India also. There should be a space, a proper space, and a proper political process should be encouraged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. You gave a very positive historical perspective, and also that peace process and dialogue with the stakeholders of Kashmir. And the movement here also is that the Kashmir societal and attitudinal change is happening gradually. And the society and the attitudes in the society are changing. And they are changing for the good. And there is a vast realization that India is the future for Kashmir. That is how I can discern from the summum bonum of the presentations by all the panelists so far. I now revert to a young Kashmiri before I come to General B.K. Sharma. He'll excuse me for an interruption for 5 minutes for a young Kashmiri who is Junaid Mir, and he is the person who was today on the forefront of in Kashmir and in Srinagar of raising the hoardings and also taking a procession to the United Nations office in Srinagar, saying that 22nd October 1947 is a black spot and black day in our history of Kashmir. He is a young, promising, dynamic social activist, and maybe ultimately he turns out to be a politician. But so far, as a civil society activist, very committed person to social justice and justice for Kashmiris, I want to give him floor for 5 minutes in order to just give us the ground account of today's activities and also his thoughts about the way forward. Junaid Mirza.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me a chance to speak in the webinar. As today we all assembled here virtually, I would like to let the participants know that for the first time in last 70 years, a Black Day was observed in Srinagar against the tribal invasion of Pakistan in 2nd October 1947. I believe that we are at a very important point in the history of Jammu and Kashmir, from where we can reverse the situation and
Bhan Sahab, we have lost Junaid Sahab. Probably he's from Srinagar and he's connected on 2G. So we've lost him.
Can we get him back? Or we can make him wait till General Sharma.
I am back. I am back.
Oh, he's
Okay,
back.
please.
So I was discussing that we are at a very important point in the history of Jammu and Kashmir, from where we can reverse the situation and lead Jammu and Kashmir into a peaceful and prosperous future. We are able to openly call out the enemy, and this is going to go a long way in permeating the facts in the social fabric of Kashmir. People who have been misled by the proceedings of political mafia of Kashmir. We had today organized a symposium and a solidarity walk, which concluded with the presentation of a war crime memorandum against Pakistan to the UN officials in Srinagar. The weed of separatism had to be taken out, and the abrogation has facilitated that process. And countering our enemy, it needs full exposition of its real face in front of the people. That's what we did today. And I believe this is a new beginning, and surely, if cashed upon it, it is definitely an opportunity to reverse the wrongs of the past. We have to act for welfare and development and encourage constructive politics and provide opportunities and press footage to new crop of politicians who, with their vision, can change the future of this unfortunate heaven that has been a victim of mindless violence from last many decades. So, as we all know, that Pakistan and India have been taken two contrasting paths as nation. The developmental indicators of both countries act as evidence in support of my statements. India and Pakistan have been at loggerheads from the time the two countries were born, and it is astonishing to see that after liberating themselves from the British clutch of imperialism, a lot of energy and resources have been wasted in confrontation against each other. Pakistan openly accepts Islam as its national religion, which makes democracy and religion come to loggerheads with each other. That's a fact, and it is their bitter reality. India is a country, we all believe India is a country full of diversity, and Jammu and Kashmir's accession to the Union of India put a stamp on the diverse, secular, and tolerant nature of India. Pakistan's existence is something that a liberal mindset will always have a problem with due to the constitutional nature of Pakistan. And Kashmir is the key point of confrontation between the two countries, and its division is something that has become an unsolvable problem. The hype that Kashmir issue has received over the past 7 decades makes it something beyond simple comprehension. And the result is that none gets followed, and an undesirable mixture, which neither becomes democratic nor Puritan, is taken to be a norm. Pakistan does not have a moral code of action internationally, as anything in the name of Islam gets justified in that country. That is very insane. And people are naturally confused about adherence in Pakistan. Should they follow Sharia or the law of the land? Is a question that remains a problem to deal with in Pakistan. And Pakistan's action in Kashmir revolves around the same puzzle of Islamic interpretation. India has had to bear a lot from Pakistan in Kashmir and outside Kashmir uh, always. On 5th August 2019, India as a country decided that it cannot act as a spectator to the designs of Pakistan, which is run by its army. So the Article 370, which had acted as a wall of separation between the rest of India and the Jammu and Kashmir, was abrogated. The move is one of the most, I believe, it's one of the most significant moves that has been made by India against the designs of Pakistan. And the article that had become a vestige in the constitution was just a source of alienation and isolation of Kashmir. And moreover, the region got surrounded by the mountains of corruption and political bigotry by the political leadership of the place. Pakistan uh, could openly spread separatist propaganda on the ground in the mainstream leadership, would act as mute spectators to the statements of sedition by Pakistan's proxies in Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir has always been flooded with central grants that have been able to create infrastructural facilities in J&K. The role that the mainstream had was to develop the human resource of Jammu and Kashmir in terms of temper and skills. Today, we see the mainstream from Kashmir wants to lie to the country about the development of the region that they have been responsible for. In all honesty, the development that they talk about is nothing, which I believe is just taking credit for something they have had zero roles to play in. In both cases, the political leadership having allegiance to India failed miserably. 370 was portrayed as an article that was for the protection of people from India advance, a country that has been pumping billions of dollars to the place without much loyalty in the Muslim dominated Kashmir belt. And the mainstream leadership had become middlemen who would lie to both the people and the central government. The result was a confusion in the identity of a Kashmiri who developed a belief of different, who just, you know, developed a kind of belief of being different from other Indians. The difference would have been something positive. Had the region seen progress, peace, and happiness over the past 70 years, but in contrast, it led to the emergence of an inverse superiority complex. Inverse because why I said inverse, it's because people had zero absolute standards for living, and yet they were made to believe that.
Bandhav, I think we have again lost Junaid Saab.
He'll be in. He's giving us a very good. Is he in? Yeah, he's again in.
Let's see.
Yes. Junaid Sahab, are you in?
You will need to unmute yourself. Junaid Saab, you will need to unmute yourself. Please unmute.
Yes, sir. Am I back, sir?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
You are back.
So, sir, the question is what I personally believe. We have a beautiful constitution that, if made functional ideally, can produce groundbreaking change in Jammu and Kashmir. Another challenge that remains is that of terrorism. And for that to go, mass contact and reform through engagement and education are a very important task which we must do. The move of abrogation is something that must be considered as a checkmate and a stalemate to the designs of Pakistan. And the only challenge that we face as a country is of developing the region of Jammu and Kashmir in such a manner that the prejudices and reservations get reversed. And this is what I wanted to say. And moreover, today almost 550 people were a part of gathering which we organized in SKICC. Then we had a car rally to Lalit. From Lalit, we did a solidarity walk in respect of the martyrs who were killed by the tribal men of Pakistan, who were sent by them in 22nd October 1947. And it was a, I think it was a huge success for the first time in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. That's what I wanted to say, sir.
Thank you, Junaid Sahab. You have enlightened us of the importance of this day today, observed by you and your group. It's a lot of effort, and you are taking an initiative which sets up a new way and new direction for the new age youth, because you are yourself a young, budding, I will not say social activist, but as a path breaker, and you are giving it, you are an agent of, you are acting as an agent of the change of the narrative in Jammu and Kashmir. We all thank you for the efforts and will be closely uh, doing some more activity with you. And now I request my friend, philosopher and guide, General B.K. Sharma, who is heading a very prestigious think tank called United Services Institution of India, which advises on the geopolitical and geo-operational strategies to the government, and also he belongs to Jammu and Kashmir, and he has all the moorings and roots engraved in the state of Jammu and Kashmir like us. And he has a very wise narrative to share with us and also give us the India's military response. As I could gather from the speakers earlier, one unanimity in all the narratives was that Pakistan is a failed state, not only militarily vis-a-vis India, but it is failed state economically. It has failed Kashmiris. It has only inflicted death and destruction in Kashmir. And Kashmiris as a society have come to realize that Pakistan has no place in their body politic or socio or even socio-religious cultural space anymore available in Kashmir. It has failed in 1947. It is failing now also. So therefore, in view of a virtual consensus, and you were the person who described today's today's webinar, as a unique webinar because most of us, all of us, are the sons and daughters of the soil. And I took this opportunity to organize this webinar because Kashmiris and Jammu and Kashmir people must talk within themselves, talk to each other, bridge the first gulf between them, which has been created by the politics of Jammu and Kashmir. Let us bridge that and then collate the ideas and have unity of ideas to salvage our rich heritage and rich polity of Jammu and Kashmir. General Sharma Sahab, your thoughts, please. And you will be also it is called, what is that called? Almost a concluding, because time is also, you'll be giving us the concluding remarks also. I don't know whether we can entertain questions now because it is
Sir,
also.
we're already running short of time, sir.
Yes, so therefore, General Sharma Sahab, I would request, beseech you that you present your thoughts and give the concluding remarks of this webinar. What are the messages and takeaways from this? General Sharma Sahab.
Thank you, Ashok ji. It's been quite a privilege to be with my co-panelists who belong to the same state that I do. There is no denying the fact that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have gone through many trials and tribulations, and I being one. For the reason that I lost 4 of my blood relations to militant bullets, and then came a couple of years later a call of duty when I was deployed in Kashmir as an infantry battalion commander with 1,000 troops under my command. And then the thought came that what should I do? And my conscience was guided by 2 things. One, I must protect the spirit of Kashmiriat. And second, I must uphold the ethos of Indian military, that we are here to protect the people and not to let our own personal losses and revenges to come in between. And I can say with a sense of pride that when I was leaving that area, people said, "Sir, Toichu is boy, you fight elections here, you leave army and you become a political representative." So I can say with a sense of pride that we were able to bring peace and prosperity and win people which are actually the center of gravity of any counterinsurgency campaign. Having said that, it is very important for us, for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, to carry out an individual and collective introspection from where is this pain coming. Because at the moment, the whole narrative is that perhaps Indian state is responsible for all the pain. That is not true. So it's very important for us to actually analyze. And let me tell you, during my interaction, I have been speaking on Kashmir to young people from Kashmir. There is a loss of inheritance as far as we people are concerned. When you speak to young people, they don't know that we started our day with prayers like Sare Jahan se Acha Hindustan Hamara, लब पे आती है दुआ बन के तमन्ना मेरी, इंसाफ की डगर पे बच्चों दिखाओ चल के. And then our role models and heroes were Zainul Abidin, Lal Ded, Habba Khatun. It was, Makbul Sherwani, and it was Master Abdul Aziz. It was Nand Rishi. And now you talk to present generation, these memories have been erased from their minds. They don't know what our heritage, what our civilization, what our culture was all about. Political agitation to the state of Jammu and Kashmir is not new. Recall when Sheikh Abdullah was put behind the bars, there was uprising. When Moe Muqaddas was lost, there was an uprising, but there was no violence. And from where this element of violence got induced in Kashmiri society. And there is that elephant in the room, and that is Pakistan. And what Pakistan did, firstly, it militarized the thinking of people. And because that was the antithesis to the very idea of two-nation theory. And therefore, they had a design. And therefore, that design of Pakistan, as far as Kashmir is concerned, still persists. And what are their larger strategic objectives? They want state of Jammu and Kashmir because that gives them a common border with China and Afghanistan. And now by CPAC, China has become a de facto third party in Jammu and Kashmir imbroglio. They want to keep the failed concept of two-nation theory alive by playing up the Sunni Muslim card in Kashmir, otherwise it is failed. The third thing is they are looking at Kashmir's water resources, which is the lifeline of the entire irrigation system of Pakistan. And together with China, as part of larger design, they want to keep India on the horns of two-front dilemma. Now, when all their military endeavors through various wars to grab state of Jammu and Kashmir failed, they resorted to proxy war, and that is the war of 2,000 cuts to destabilize Kashmir and keep portraying India as an existential threat to Pakistan, so that Pakistan Army's salience and its primacy in the state of affairs is maintained. The moment Kashmir is resolved, there is no threat to Pakistan. So keep the pot boiling. Now, post 370, this entire paradigm has undergone a shift. Just as a run-up to 370, Indian government took some steps to disrupt the entire ecosystem, the militancy there. I will not get into that. And subsequently came the abrogation of Article 370. Now, Pakistan at this juncture has realized that due to the threat of FATF, which is a millstone hanging around its neck, it has to devise new ways and means to keep the pot boiling in state. And therefore, what is its design? What are the new ways and means that it is coining? It is very important for us Kashmiris to understand that. And what it has done now, it has coined a new resistance front for Kashmir, which has become an umbrella organization by pooling militant cadres of Hizbul Mujahideen, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Al-Badr. And they have become more acellular in nature because some of these organizations have become a little defunct, and therefore 5, 6, 7, 8 young Kashmiri boys about age 16 to 25 get together and undertake some kind of a strike against soft targets. And who are those soft targets? They are Kashmiris. Some sarpanch, some nambardar, some poor policeman, somebody, some patwari, or some political worker. They've not been able to target army. They have been targeting their own Kashmiri brothers and sisters. The second thing that has what has happened is that due to fencing on the border, now they are devising new ways and means of infiltration. It is through Chaki Samani area, that is south of Poonch. They're also using Shakargarh Bulge. They're also using porous borders of Bangladesh and Nepal to put more and more these trained cadres into Kashmir. They're also resorting to new tunnels which they are constructing in the IB sector, and also using drones for throwing up weapons or dropping weapons to keep the militancy alive. There is another design to give this militancy a pan Kashmir or greater Kashmir kind of a profile so that you can spread it to the dormant areas of Poonch, Rajouri, and Chenab belt, which are contiguous to Kashmir Valley. They're also working on networking through new nodes which they are creating in countries like Turkey, which has become a favored destination for some of anti-India rhetoric, and also Malaysia. And they're using extensively these digital platforms and other, portals and other kind of websites to whip up the radical feeling and spread despondency and hatred. As per some estimates, presently there are about 300 of these cadres which are active in Pakistan. There are estimates there are 39 training camps still there. There are about 22 launch pads, and some of these training camps have been shifted to some of the areas astride Durand line in Afghanistan, and Haqqani network is giving them some kind of a tutelage. The propaganda machinery in Jammu and Kashmir is still intact, and which comprises some of the perverted Maulvis, some teachers, some middle class, educated people, and particularly the retired community who want to go and establish their own legitimacy and their credibility within the society. But at a grand strategic level, they are looking towards China to do all the heavyweight lifting there and keep their strategy of calibration of keeping infiltration on, but by keeping the temperature a little bit low so that you don't cross a certain threshold. And this is the design that is going to remain. In the ultimate analysis, even though Indian state has been able to disrupt Pakistan infested or injected ecosystem, but their structures are deeply rooted in the society. Their modules exist, and given an opportunity, they can revive militancy all over again in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, the next important thing that I want to talk about, that the only organ of our society that can defeat this design is the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And therefore, people of Jammu and Kashmir are the center of gravity, but we have to understand the psychology of people of Kashmir presently. And there are certain perceptions, and those perceptions are of victimhood and persecution at the hands of Indian state. That needs to be addressed. Second thing is there is an anger and resentment with regard to deprivation of 2G, which affects education system, many other things. Corruption has actually increased in the state. There is a disconnect between public administration and the people at the grassroots level. Also, employment is an opportunity, and Jammu and Kashmir police, which should actually be doing policing, are not seen as some kind of a protector of people, but more as a kind of a harassing force. These perceptions need to be addressed. There are also genuine concerns with regard to delimitation and domicile act, thinking that their properties and land will be grabbed, their jobs will go away to people of rest of India. These need to be addressed. And there is, of course, a very genuine aspiration of restoration of statehood and being heard by the Indian state. That please give us an opportunity, what is our anguish and what we want to achieve. I just want to say, as far as militancy or terrorism is concerned, Indian state has more than enough capacity to deal with militancy. We were able to cope up with it during the worst time. So it's not a big issue to deal with it kinetically. In kinetic domain, I would say, yes, we need to whip up our intelligence, particularly cross-border intelligence. We also need to invest more into comprehensive integrated border management system so that with human effort, we are able to integrate technology. And also all our operations should be hardcore intelligence-based surgical strikes, respect human rights, and ensure that there is zero collateral damage, which that causes more problems. But I would emphasize the need for non-kinetic means to deal with the problem. And what is those non-kinetic means is firstly understand the dynamics of that anti-India narrative, from where that anti-India narrative is being whipped up. Be it issues like, say, NCR, that is the National Citizenship Register, your that CAA, whether these are judgments of Babri Masjid, which resonate in a certain way with the people, whether it is Domicile Act, delimitation, job and land grab kind of concerns. So these perceptions, unless you address these perceptions, we will not be able to win over the people. Therefore, another issue that is extremely important is that this new security a political dimension which has come up there, that is the multi-party alliance, it is likely to be supported by Jamaat-e-Islami in times to come. And therefore, we may witness an era of prolonged civil disobedience, mass political movement. And therefore, that would be actually sprinkled with certain sporadic militant attacks. And our adversaries, particularly Pakistan, can engineer and trigger certain tipping points for a mass violence, forcing the state to use security forces to quell that violence. We have to be very, very mindful of these kind of trends and take anticipatory and preventive measures so that we don't have the mob protests all over again. What is important at this juncture that we carry out a comparative and comprehensive analysis of ethno-regional, age-based concerns and aspirations of different segments of society. You cannot paint the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir with one brush. You have to see what are the requirements of different areas and different population samples. And accordingly, we need to craft a customized response to address those concerns. Otherwise, it would be very, very mechanical and I would say a very superficial approach. It is a very good development that this district development councils will be empowered. Now, I feel that Indian Army had started a very good program there, that is the Sadbhavna program. Sadbhavna program and that back to village program must be integrated, and the local people must have the ownership and participation in all those programs. It should not be spoon fed, it should not be forced down their throat, but there should be an all people's approach to do with these kind of developmental works. We need to launch positive and constructive theme-based electronic and social media programs, which would be complemented by certain deliverables on ground. There is no point in creating rhetoric if there are no results on ground. And I would say, and I have been harping on this issue, that if you today want to engage with Kashmiri youth, they will not listen to people who are outside Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir. They say you are from Lutyens, Delhi. Aapko hamari problem ka kya pata hai? There are iconic figures, very well-respected figures from Jammu and Kashmir. Please make use of them to engage with their own people and rationalize with them. And therefore, the role and responsibility of think tanks like United Service Institute of India and any other think tank becomes very important, so that you're able to create a conducive and enabling environment for this dialogue to develop between the youth and between the state. So that should actually become our top priority. Finally, I would say that the Indian state also should not look at Jammu and Kashmir issue from the perspective of political brinkmanship, but more from a very vital national security issue, which requires all government and all people's approach and a sustainable dialogue, which is complemented by deliverables on ground. So with these few words, I think I'll just come to the end of my exposition. I don't think anything to say. In the final analysis, I would say that we had a wonderful panel. They have actually come out with some very, very true and very realistic perspectives. All that I can offer as from the United Service Institution of India, that we can provide you a platform for this sustained dialogue, as it remains within the sovereignty of Indian state, and it can work towards sustainable peace and security in our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Saab. Sunil, do we have some time?
I think we should wrap up. I don't see any questions.
No questions, but everybody should be given a last minute, 1 minute, everybody for his.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that, sir. We can give 1 minute to each of the panelists.
I will start from Professor Javed Kakroo. 1 minute, last thoughts.
Thank you very much, Bhan Saab, to giving me last 1 minute. It was a very fantastic and eye-opening session, Mr. Ashok Banji. Couple of things. Lastly, Mr. B.K.Sharma has very rightly said this thing, that the people living outside, either in Delhi or in United Kingdom like me, they are not going to have any impact on the ground there. It's very important to reach out to the common people of Kashmir, which we have been advocated since a long time. Coming to a little bit of things, we need to give attention and we need to give the focus, our thinking towards a couple of things, which is very important. As I will repeat just in 1 second, that instead of digging out the old wounds, let us be very clear towards the situation in Kashmir at the moment, which is that if we talk about massacre in Mirpur, then we have to talk about the massacre in Jammu as well. And Mr. Manzoor Shah, he rightly said this thing, that after Article 307 was finished, there should be the peace development. But unfortunately, the steps towards that need to be taken, and those that they should reflect at the ground. If nothing reflects at the ground, we will be beating about the bush again and again. And lastly, I would say that Article 370 was never a barrier for the development. And after finishing the Article 370, it's never a barrier for the development. If we really want to develop Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir as a state, then we should not look for those barriers which are not the barriers and reach out to the people, common people, as General B.K. Sharma has rightly said. Thanks very much, Mr. Bhan. I can't hear you. I was.
Manzoor, you're on mute.
Okay. Thank you, Javed Saab. Now, Dr. Ashraf Saab, your last thought. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. So, what I have been always saying, I'm just going to repeat that. It is simply that Article 370, whether that is in place or it's not in place, it hardly matters practically on the ground as far as political process is concerned. Now, my point has always been that the democracy should be allowed to penetrate into the grassroots. There has hardly been ever any free and fair election in Kashmir, excepting 1977, as the people say. I don't know how far that was a very free and fair election. It's also disputable. But the idea is, until and unless you have democracy at the grassroots levels, you have free and fair elections, and you have a political space in Jammu and Kashmir, I don't think there is going to be any change in future. Things are going to go the way they have been for the past 70 years.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Is Junaid Mir there available? Is Junaid there? Junaid Mir?
No, I don't see him. I think he's dropped off.
General Katoch Saab, for a last thoughts. General Katoch.
Yeah. I'll just last few thoughts. Firstly, of course, you rightly were calling out to Mr. Junaid Mir, and I think his views, I really felt they were like a breath of fresh air. And I do hope that, initiatives like his or other things lead to a tipping point, including what Mr. Ashraf said, grassroots democracy. Something leads to a tipping point, which brings Kashmir to peace in the same manner that a particular tipping point occurred somewhere in 89, 88, 89 it occurred, where a rigged election or the Pakistani subversion led to lighting the flames in the chinar leaves. And I hope this tipping point will douse those flames and turn those leaves into something we can use in our kangri and keep ourselves warm. Because General Sharma and myself, we initially came to know each other in the high altitude office school at Gulmarg. And in Gulmarg, even up to 1986, I could take my wife on a motorcycle, go down to Lal Chowk, see a movie, and come back to Gulmarg at night. And the only thing I was scared about was meeting a bear on the road coming up to Gulmarg. So things happened so fast, and I'm very hopeful that things will happen equally fast and get back to normal. But to do that, certain good narratives have to be created, and some wrong narratives have to be, slowly beaten down. And like a very wrong narrative, which always comes to my mind is that it always starts off saying Maharaja Gulab Singh bought Kashmir Valley and all so many Kashmiris like cattle and sheep for 7.5 lakh Nanak Shahi rupees. No, he did not buy them like cattle and sheep. He was paying a war indemnity which the East India Company had levied on the Sikh Empire, and which they were not in a position to pay. And so it was not really that he was buying, Kashmir just like that. He was paying an indemnity. Now, this is a wrong narrative which has been created. If somebody really bought somebody like cattle and sheep, it was the United States of America which bought 828 million, 828,000 square miles of land called the Louisiana Purchase for 4 cents an acre, along with so many other Red Indians in between. So that was something like buying cattle and sheep. This was not. So these wrong narratives have been created. The Dogra rule lasted what? 101 years only, right? And so I'm sure good things will come very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, General Saab. Now, Manzoor Shah Saab, please, your last.
Thank you very much, Bhan Sahab. I think we all agree on 2 points, that we need peace and progress in Kashmir. And in order to achieve that peace and progress, I think I want to add one more point, that India as a state has more responsibility to also reach to the victims of the conflict of last 32 years, and also find the ways to engage common people in the political and democratic process. These are my final thoughts.
Thank you. And Manmeet. Dr. Manmeet. Manmeet.
Manmeet ji, you will need to unmute yourself.
Yes, now I could unmute myself.
Yeah.
Big thanks to all the distinguished panelists again. I learned a lot, unlearned a lot also. So I had been given the topic of speaking on the massacre in Mirpur and Muzaffarabad, and I'm sure it's not a very nice thing to talk about. So it will give some kind of jitters to people, and it will be gloomy, it will be dark, and I'm sorry for invoking those kind of sentiments.
It was your topic.
But then there is also saying that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So I think it's high time J&K, which has been actually doomed, cursed land of the mystics and saints, the Nund Rishi and Lalted, as somebody spoke, the Pirvar and the Rishwar, which we call it. I think there is something to it which is different from all other aspects of the other Indian states. And that is about the psychological and emotional quotient of Kashmiris, which is different from others. The Indian state also needs to understand Kashmir and Kashmiris on a different level. We are people with dark humor, and we are also very sentimental fools also. So we need to be understood in a different perspective altogether. We are not Punjabis. And secondly, the political process needs to be initiated at the grassroots level. But at the same time, we need not make the fresh breath of change, which we call the people, the sitting ducks for the, nefarious designs of the lobbies General Sharma talked about, raising a hue and cry and, the flash in the pan kind of proxy war which Pakistan plays. So I think we need to be wary of that also, and we need to give adequate security to those people also. And that will happen only with civil society of Kashmir joining in. It's heartening to see so many Kashmiris here. And I think there needs to be a more leveraging of the civil society of Kashmir and bringing them on the table without any fear, because many want to speak, they cannot. So I think please, let's also bring the minorities of Kashmir. And at the end, I would also like to say, as a Kashmiri Sikh and a Sikh, why as Sikhs have been at the crossroads of Hindu and Muslim civilizations, and it's been the way we have been, made. So why don't we bring the fresh breath of change and we be the bridge between the two warring communities? I'm always striving for that. Let me bring a Kashmiri Pandit and Kashmiri Muslim to Lal Chowk, and let's set the
Thank you. Let us hope for that. General Sharma Saab, you are now thought.
See, I have traveled all over the world, and I can say there is no place as beautiful as Jammu and Kashmir is. Be it natural beauty, our civilization, our heritage, our customs, our traditions, our way of life. We have to make an auto-suggestion. Do we want Kashmir to be Kashmir and better form of Switzerland, or we want it to be Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq?
Great. Good.
So if we want it to be better than Switzerland, then we as elders need to rationalize with our own youth and don't shirk that responsibility. If we are shirking that responsibility, I think we are failing. Morally, we are failing. Therefore, I think we need to get together, have more and more platforms like this. And I would urge you, Ashok ji, please get hold of some Kashmiri students who are studying in Delhi and neighboring areas, and let's make a beginning from there to rationalize with them. And let them be an ambassadors of change and go and engage with their own brethren and start expanding this, these concentric circles of positivity and a positive narrative. And I'm sure once we gain little traction, Government of India and J&K government and people of J&K will support us in these endeavors. So I throw the ball back to your court, and you made a good beginning, and keep up the momentum.
I'll try to do my best. I give last 1 minute to my coordinator, who is an entrepreneur basically, and a very incorrigible Kashmiri. He always tells me that, Ashok ji, when should we go back? And there is a time, Sunil ji, that you must learn to live with the motto that we shall return back to our own homeland, that is Kashmir. And give your concluding thoughts before I wind it up.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Ashok ji. It was a very encouraging session. A lot of things, a lot of learning, a lot of positives. Gave me very positive vibes. I think there's a lot of things which we came to know today, which probably opens up a field for more action. And as somebody rightly pointed it out and said, we need to look at more at positive. We need to look at changing the narratives. Wrong narratives, don't look at those, and I think we need to look at the positive narratives going forward. And it is the involvement at the grassroots. It is, we should look at a way forward, but also look at mitigating the pain of each and every person who has suffered in these last 32 years. So thank you for such an encouraging vision.
Thank you, Sunil. I'm grateful. Sir, I want to present vote of thanks to everybody, to Manzoor Shah from UK, to Professor Javed Saab from UK, to my esteemed friends, Lieutenant General Katoch, Major General B.K. Sharma, Dr. Ashraf, who is one of my buddy friends, and to Dr. Manmeet, whose contribution was fabulous, and she had done a good research-oriented job, to Junaid, Mir, and to all others, to Sunil, and to all the participants who heard us patiently. And I hope that their participation will swell in the next webinar, and we'll be able to contribute more and more. Kashmir is in pain. Kashmir is bleeding for the last 30 years. And I, for one, am also living a traumatic life outside my home. I have a right to live in my own home with dignity. And I want to retrieve my roots. My community's roots are engraved in Jammu and Kashmir particularly. And there is an atmospherics now, and the government of India needs to act here and now to facilitate the return of all those who have been forced to live in exile, and also return an era of development, peace, so that the future generations of Kashmir live peacefully and enjoy the fruits of Indian democracy. Thank you very much, all the ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Spoke well, Manzoor.
Thank you.
I liked you.
Okay, I'll be closing the session now. Thank you.